Chapter 1405. Killing Intent. Uncontrollable, towering killing intent. In the battle of geniuses, it wasn't against Yao or demons. Bai Yulong was a member of the god race, yet he'd used the most vile methods to torture Shui Mo to the brink of death. When he closed his eyes, Yi Zichen could imagine Murong Xuen kneeling on the ground, her eyes filled with unwillingness and hatred. It was easy to imagine the devastation she'd experienced in that secret realm. He didn't care what was so special about the Bai family that it could force Shui Yang to give up. He didn't care if his actions caused unnecessary trouble. He couldn't just let Shui Mo's injuries go. Yi Zichen's eyes shone with a sharp light like an unsheathed blade. Even from a great distance, people could feel the bone-chilling coldness from his gaze. He didn't want to think about what the Holy Maiden of the Ninely was plotting. He just wanted to avenge Shui Mo. As for anything else, he didn't care, nor did he need to. The Holy Maiden of the Ninely could sense Yi Zichen's fluctuating emotions, and from time to time, a faint smile appeared in her eyes. As the Holy Maiden of the Demons, she was naturally pleased to see the god race's internal strife. It seems the gods aren't united after all. Just now, it seems someone deliberately used the power of space to send us out. The Holy Maiden narrowed her eyes and chuckled. Although the Divine Arbiter had done it in secret, she'd still seen through it. However, she absolutely wouldn't point it out. No matter what the other party's goal was, it wouldn't hurt her in the slightest. Pu Jingwan, Yang Jian, the Great Sage, and Xiao Yumei followed behind them. They sensed Yi Zichen's towering rage, so they flew after him. They didn't talk at all along the way. They just followed. Yang Jian and the Great Sage's job was to kill Yi Zichen, and they would follow. If Yi Zichen wanted to slay a demon, they'd follow. There was no need to say much between brothers, nor was there any need to hesitate. Xiao Yumei was purely worried something would happen to Yi Zichen, so she'd come to protect him. As for Pu Jingwan, her employer's safety was her responsibility. Someone deliberately used the power of space to send us out. You sensed it, right? Along the way, Pu Jingwan sent a message through divine sense. When the other three received the message, they couldn't help but nod. The Divine Arbiter's mastery of space was indeed at the pinnacle, but these people weren't mediocre. It was only natural that he could sense it. Should we tell Yi Zichen? Asked Pu Jingwan. The Great Sage and Yang Jian remained silent. After a brief hesitation, Xiao Yumei gently shook her head. There's no need. Even if he said it now, it would be very difficult for him to listen. Just follow him. No matter what he wants to do, as long as he doesn't get hurt, I'll be at ease. She had always been like this. Even though she was now extraordinarily strong and Yi Zichen was nothing in front of her, she would still respect all of his decisions. She was adept and smart, so she knew what to do at the right time. When Pu Jingwan heard this, she fell silent. She'd just spoken up to warn them, worried that they hadn't sensed it. Since they all knew about it, it was enough. Besides, she was a bodyguard. It would be best if she didn't have to fight, but if she had to, Pu Jingwan wasn't afraid. Light streaked through the sky. Dozens of sovereigns moved at the same time, and the pressure they emitted was absolutely terrifying. Even though they were flying through the air, the cultivators on the ground were still terrified even though they were descending from the sky. Many of the cultivators who were resting or immersed in their heavenly circulations were also startled awake. And this was just the beginning. A few moments later, after the rulers flew past, the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda followed closely behind. Their diviner and sky supreme's auras spread out. Ear-piercing whistles tore through the air. The central divine mountain was no longer tranquil. Countless cultivators' hearts trembled. So long as they looked up, they'd see a dense horde of sky supremes and above flying through the sky. They thought back to the killing intent that they had vaguely sensed from above the void. Something bad was about to happen. Another 4 hours passed. Spirit City is up ahead. It's also where the Bai family is stationed. When they were about 100 kilometers away, the holy maiden of the Ninely stopped. She pointed at the hazy city shrouded in mist and said, "I can't go any further. I can't go any further. This is the limit of what I can do. You know, I have the aura of demons on me. Spirit City has no fewer experts than Heavenly God City, and this isn't the host of the Battle of Geniuses. You can say that they're particularly sensitive to the aura of demons. If I go any further, they'll easily discover me. It's not good for you if you can easily discover my aura." "Many thanks." Yi Zichen cupped his hands at the Holy Maiden, then turned to leave. He couldn't be bothered to bicker with her. He couldn't be bothered to ask for the Bai family's exact location in the city. All he needed to do was confirm that the Bai family was in the city up ahead. As for how to find them, he had his own plans. Just as he was about to leave, he heard the Holy Maiden speak again. "I suggest you restrain your killing intent. Even if you're a god, the people in the city will be able to sense why you're here. Besides, you're far more famous than you think. You should understand what I mean. That's none of your business. Yi Zichen will remember your kindness in leading the way." Yi Zichen glanced at her coldly, then headed straight for Spirit City. The Holy Maiden sighed and shook her head. As she watched the furious Yi Zichen leave, she couldn't help but mutter to herself, "You asked me to persuade him, and I did. You asked me to persuade him, and I did, but he didn't listen. What else could I do?" "What? You're saying I harmed him? You're slandering me. I was helping him. God Emperor Zhou Wu has had his eye on him for a long time. If I can take advantage of this and cut off one of Zhou Wu's arms, it'll be of great help to him in the future. Fine, I admit it. I did use him. But in the end, it was a win-win situation. Isn't that good? In any case, I've already done what you asked me to. For the next 3 months, you need to fulfill your promise. Don't fight over control of your body. Once the dust settles, I might actually agree to extract your soul. But until then, you need to be good, got it?" The Holy Maiden's mutterings came to an end. She looked silently at Yi Zichen, who was about to enter the city. She reached out, and a black door appeared in front of her. Demonic energy poured out of the black door. She glanced at Yi Zichen's back and muttered to herself. Chapter 1406. Little did they know, at that moment a few people were standing beneath an ancient tree outside Spirit City. One of them, a man reeking of alcohol, was leaning against a tree trunk and hiccuping. From time to time, he would open his gourd and pour some wine into his mouth. Even from afar, they could smell the pungent stench of alcohol. Opposite him was a man who was constantly sharpening the axe in his hand. Between them stood an elegant young master in a white robe holding a folding fan, a tall and sturdy man with a full beard, and a beautiful woman who seemed to be touching up her makeup with a mirror in her hand. They were the divine generals the profound pavilion had sent here. Although they looked like they were doing something else, in reality, they'd been vigilantly scanning the city with their divine senses. They were very cautious. Their divine senses only covered the city, but they didn't probe inside. Hubatsi had instructed them not to let the Bai family get within 30,000 miles of Heavenly God City. However, to save trouble, they might as well block off the city. So long as the Bai family dared leave the city, they'd deal with them. What a powerful killing intent! All of a sudden, the bearded man narrowed his eyes. As soon as he finished speaking, the others all stopped what they were doing. Even the drunken god of wine glanced up at him. Whoosh! 2 air-piercing sounds streaked across the sky. The profound pavilion's divine generals were waiting for the Bai family members outside Spirit City. They instantly noticed Yi Zichen and the Ninely Holy Maiden flying past. "That kid is Big Sister's nephew, isn't he?" The bearded man frowned. The others nodded. Although Yi Zichen had never met these divine generals before, he was Xian Ji's nephew. As her subordinates, they had to get to know him in private. Why'd he come here? As they spoke, the bearded man knit his brows. This killing intent is coming from him. Also, the person standing next to him seems to be a member of the Devil Clan. The divine generals watched silently as Yi Zichen and the Holy Maiden of the Nine Li stopped in their tracks. They watched as Yi Zichen dashed straight for Spirit City, then the Holy Maiden passed through the gates of the Demon Realm and returned to the Demon Realm. "I understand," said the elegant man with the folding fan. The elegant young master with a folding fan frowned and said, "Actually, everything that Big Sister has arranged is for her nephew. Why don't we?" Before he could finish his sentence, they heard several more piercing sounds in the air. Behind them were countless whistling sounds that resembled a rain of swords. The divine general's pupils shrank. The elegant young man also spoke up. "See that? I'm absolutely right. Based on the series of events that had transpired, this brat was probably here to cause trouble for the Bai families by Yulong. 13. Tell Master 8 and Big Sister that Yi Zichen has come to Spirit City." "All right." The woman holding the mirror nodded, but the god of wine had already risen to his feet. "No need, I've already told him. Let's not stay here, let's go straight to the Bai family. Looks like I'm going to have to use this drunkenness soon." Spirit City's northern gate. Yi Zichen was furious, but he had to admit that the Holy Maiden's final warning had helped him retain a shred of reason. When he was still a few kilometers away from the city, he gradually slowed down and spread out his divine scent. 2 celestial beings were resting in the city's watchtower. There were also several teams patrolling outside the city. The city's defenses were meticulously laid out. If he rashly entered, he'd definitely be discovered. Bang, bang, bang. An afterimage flashed past. In the blink of an eye, Yi Zichen knocked the patrolling soldiers unconscious. Yi Zichen had done it flawlessly. Add to that the vast difference in cultivation between him and the patrolling soldiers, and the diviner resting atop the walls hadn't sensed anything at all. It wasn't until Yi Zichen entered the tower that the diviner opened his eyes. But before he could say anything, Yi Zichen grabbed them by the neck. "If you don't want to die, you'd better behave yourself." The diviner hadn't even seen how Yi Zichen had attacked, so he knew full well the gap between them. Yi Zichen saw that the diviner didn't resist at all, so he let go. The 2 diviners fell heavily to the ground. "Who are you?" shouted one of the diviners. For a diviner to become a diviner, his courage was extraordinary. Even in the face of Yi Zichen's murderous aura, he managed to form a complete sentence. "This is the Central Divine Mountains Spirit City. What exactly is your goal in raiding our city at night?" Yi Zichen had no time to waste with him, nor did he feel like wasting his breath. "From now on, you will answer whatever I ask you. If you lie or hesitate in the slightest, you die." The diviner's heart trembled. Yi Zichen's killing intent burned with fury. His opponent's aura was clearly at the diviner level, but he had no doubt that this youth had the means to kill him. Before the diviner could speak, they heard the sound of the wind whistling through the air. When he looked out of the city gate tower, he could feel the pressure coming from these people. "What the hell do you want?" The people who'd just appeared were 4 rulers and above. Furthermore, he knew full well that they were Yi Zichen's companions. Yi Zichen ignored his questions and narrowed his eyes. "Let me ask you, is there a family surnamed Bai in Spirit City?" Suddenly, the 2 diviners glanced at each other, then one of the fatter diviners spoke. "You mean yes or no?" "Yes," said the other diviner. "Where is their family estate? Is there anyone named Bai Yulong? What's his status? Is he in Spirit City right now? Speak." All of a sudden, the eyes of the chubby celestial being narrowed. He stared intently at Yi Zichen's face, then reached out and roared. You're Yi." Before he could finish his sentence, Yang Jian's hand grabbed his neck fiercely. Yi Zichen hadn't expected him to move so quickly. He twisted his neck, and the fat diviner lost all signs of life. Killing was no problem at all. If he wasn't mistaken, this fat diviner was a member of the Bai family. Otherwise, he wouldn't have reacted this way upon seeing Yi Zichen. The Bai family had definitely investigated him beforehand. They'd attacked him so ruthlessly to prevent him from sending word back to the Bai family. Chapter 1407. The diviner city guard lowered his head, not daring to meet Yi Zichen's gaze. As he spoke, his pupils twitched uncontrollably, and his body trembled violently. It was clearly winter, yet his face was drenched in sweat. He was terrified. Although he didn't know what sort of grudge these people had with the Bai family, based on the killing intent radiating from the youth, as well as the dead diviner lying on the ground, it was clear what was going on. Although the Bai family was in charge of Spirit City, he was different from the dead diviner. He wasn't a member of the Bai family, so there was no need for him to throw his life away for the sake of the Bai family. Whatever Yi Zichen asked, he answered. He didn't hesitate at all. So long as he knew something, he told Yi Zichen everything without hesitation. However, what puzzled him was the fact that the Bai family's strength was extraordinary. Although the people standing beside Yi Zichen seemed to be powerful experts as well, it was impossible for them to defeat the Bai family with just a few people. Before he could think too much about it, an ear-piercing sonic boom resounded outside Spirit City. The Celestial City Guardian General cast a glance outward, and what he saw was simply endless. Countless figures hovered in the air outside the city. At a rough estimate, there were tens of thousands of them. What made him feel even more terrified and uneasy was the aura of these people in the sky. They were all Yao. The diviner was astonished. If it were just a simple grudge between the gods and the Bai family, he wouldn't care. But if the Yao race wanted to attack the god race's Bai family, he, the diviner, didn't dare make too much noise. Instead, he stealthily tried to send word with his divine sense. Don't even think about it. Do you think I'd be stupid enough to let you send word back? Yi Zichen smiled indifferently. Under the diviner's astonished gaze, he sighed, stood up, and turned to the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Take over Spirit City. Yes, sir. Based on Yi Zichen's arrangements, it was clear that Xianji had her reasons for telling the Profound Pavilion to take over Heavenly God City. If they didn't take over the city's defenses, they might be surrounded and at a disadvantage against the Bai family. Taking control of the city would ensure that no one would suddenly attack from the rear. Even if the Bai family was powerful, they would still have a chance to retreat from the city in time. The Yao servants in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda dispersed to the other gates of Spirit City. The diviner guard's eyes widened in shock. He stared at the departing Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. He wanted to send a message to the outside, but was stopped by the restriction. Thank you for the information. As compensation, please have a good rest. Bang. Wielding the Rui Jingu Bang, the great sage smashed down on the Celestial Guardian General's head. A trickle of dark red blood flowed down his head, but the man didn't die. He was just knocked unconscious. No matter how angry Yi Zichen was, he wasn't someone who would kill the innocent. Every grievance had its perpetrator, and every debt had its debtor. What he was looking for was only the Bai clan. Yi Zichen stood atop the city gates, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he silently surveyed Spirit City. The orange-red flame wasn't very conspicuous in the dark of the night until he finished smoking the entire cigarette and threw the butt down the wall. The cigarette butt fell to the ground and sparks flew. The Bai family. Yi Zichen's eyes flashed with bone-piercing coldness as he shot into the sky. His speed was so fast that it caused sonic booms, and the surrounding space was torn to pieces by him. Pu Jingwan and Xiao Yumei followed closely behind. The great sage and Yang Jian glanced at each other, but neither of them said a word. They simply nodded, then followed Yi Zichen's aura and disappeared into the void. Spirit City's Eastern District. 3 years ago, the Bai family was still a small, unknown family clan. At the time, the city lord's surname was Duanmu. However, 3 years ago, this unknown Bai clan suddenly rose to prominence. Their clan was so powerful that it was astonishing. The Duanmu family's 10,000 years of painstaking effort were destroyed in just half a month. The Bai clan seized control of Spirit City, and the entire city became part of the Bai clan's territory. The Bai family's sudden rise to power had shaken both Spirit City and the God race. Just as countless clans pondered the Bai family's sudden rise to power, 3 months ago, they learned that the Bai family was one of the clans God Emperor Zhou Wu had been secretly nurturing. There was also Yuqi Huangfu. No one would have guessed that the God Emperor, who'd reigned for 10,000 years, had secretly nurtured so many clans. And that was just what was on the surface. No one knew how many more he'd secretly nurtured in secret. He's here. One of the profound pavilion's divine generals landed a step ahead of the Bai family. They looked up into the sky and saw that Yi Zichen had already torn through the void and arrived above the Bai family. This is the place, right? Yi Zichen grinned savagely as he looked down at the Bai family. Bai Yulong, come out and die. His furious roar was like a clap of thunder, shattering the tranquil night. His majestic voice reverberated throughout Spirit City. Countless experts were startled awake by his deafening roar. In an instant, all the lights in the city lit up. Those with relatively low cultivations stayed in their rooms in terror, not daring to look outside. The experts who thought they had some strength all walked out of their rooms and looked at the Bai clan. What was laughable was that Yi Zichen had clearly called out the Bai family. However, the Bai family was the last to emerge. Only a few breaths of time after Yi Zichen's roar did the night guards rush out in panic. Many of them reeked of alcohol and perfume, and many of them were still half-dressed. Spirit City was on high alert. How could the Bai family's night guards have ever guessed that someone would dare cause trouble for the Bai family? Yi Zichen's roar had caught them off guard. Who dares cause trouble in the Bai family's territory? Do you want to die? Don't you know whose territory this is? You're simply suicidal. How dare you cause trouble for the Bai family? Tell me your name and come forward to die. Gradually, more and more Bai family members emerged. In just a few breaths of time, over 100 people had gathered outside. It was a clamorous scene. Not all of them were members of the Bai family. Quite a few of them were retainers who'd heard of the Bai family's rise to prominence. These retainers had always been looking for an opportunity to show off, but the Bai family was too powerful, so no one dared provoke them. Now, not all of them were members of the Bai family. Quite a few of them were retainers who'd heard of the Bai family's rise to prominence. Now that they finally got the chance, they shouted even louder than the Bai family. Yi Zichen's gaze turned cold. These noises lingered in his ears, causing him, who was already enraged, to become even more infuriated. Their clamor echoed in his ears, further enraged him. Rumble. Chapter 1408. The signboard represented the family's prestige. The Bai family's signboard had shattered. This was a naked slap to the Bai family's face. Although Yi Zichen's heavenly lightning had been intimidating, it had thoroughly infuriated the Bai family clansmen, as well as the retainers who'd wanted to seize this opportunity to rise. The clamor of the crowd rose and fell, and some people even raised their weapons and started fighting. Scram! Rumble! Several more bolts of lightning descended from the sky. The people who'd been about to attack Yi Zichen were smashed to the ground. As their bodies spasmed, electric patterns could be seen flickering on their bodies. Yi Zichen's angry shout contained a lightning attribute Tao of the 5 elements. Of the 5 elements, lightning was the fiercest. Those who'd wanted to step forward, when they heard Yi Zichen's angry shout, all fell silent. No one took a single step forward. This was Yi Zichen's final warning. He really was here for Bai Yulong. He didn't want to kill too many people for no reason. But if these people still didn't know when to stop, he didn't mind. They could use their lives to make up for their ignorance. Bai, what are you shouting for? It's so late at night. Can't you let me rest properly? A youth floated up from behind them. He was only wearing pajamas and his feet were bare. As he flew over, he kept patting his mouth and yawning with a lazy look on his face. Young master. When the Bai family saw him, they all greeted him. Yi Zichen's gaze instantly locked onto him. Bai Yulong. He was Bai Yulong. The youth flew leisurely until he was 50 meters away from Yi Zichen. His clansmen greeted him as if he didn't hear them at all. He glanced disdainfully at Yi Zichen, his eyes covered with dark bags. "Who are you?" "You're Bai Yulong," said Yi Zichen. "You keep saying you want me to come out and die. Don't tell me you don't recognize me?" Bai Yulong shrugged lazily. "It seems you're someone who wants to challenge me to get famous. I'm not afraid of challenges, but you should at least pick a good one. This is the Bai family. If you challenge me in private, I'll let you off the hook. Forget about fighting, at most I'll just break your limbs. But now you've broken our Bai family's plaque. Do you want to throw your life away?" Bai Yulong said lazily, then glanced at Yi Zichen pitifully. "Isn't it good to be alive? Why do you want to die so much? It's really annoying to disturb my sleep. You guys, it's time to perform. Go and settle this for him. I'll reward you handsomely." In an instant, the laziness in Bai Yulong's eyes vanished without a trace, replaced by a venomous coldness. He had never been a good-tempered person. It could be seen from his words just now. He had accepted the challenge, yet he had to break his limbs. Even in a fair and square challenge, he had to be so ruthless. How could his heart be so good? The Bai family's experts were already itching to make a move. Those who had witnessed Yi Zichen's strength before didn't make a move. Fear would always wear them down. 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. Yi Zichen was all by himself, and there were so many of them. How could they really be scared by him? The Bai family clansmen and retainers looked at each other. After communicating with their divine sense, their gazes hardened, and they all charged at Yi Zichen. There were more than 10 people in this attack. "You're seeking death." Suddenly, a sharp, furious roar reverberated through the sky. Next, countless illusory staffs descended from the sky. The diviners in front of Yi Zichen were smashed to pieces, their souls scattered. However, among them, one diviner was rather special. After his physical body shattered, his soul didn't disperse. Instead, it gathered together and tried to escape. "Did I say you could leave?" With a delicate shout, a beautiful figure suddenly appeared in front of him. She held a glass bottle in her hand. She stretched out her right hand, and the soul was sucked into the glass bottle. She stuffed the cork back into the bottle, and a hint of a smile flashed through her eyes. Diviner souls can be refined for quite a bit of money. Then he turned to the great sage and the others and shouted, "Go easy on them. Diviner souls are pretty expensive where I come from. Even if you kill them, you kill them. Don't shatter their souls. Let me make some extra money." Only then did the Bai family members notice. To Yi Zichen's left, a man wielding a longsword was like a tiger among a pack of wolves. He slaughtered all the diviners who'd tried to attack Yi Zichen. To his right was a veiled woman. She pushed them away with her bare hands. Although she didn't kill anyone, the diviners she'd pushed away were on the verge of death. In one breath, they'd lost all ability to fight. As for the woman who'd taken the diviner soul, she didn't actually attack. All she did was complain that they'd gone too far, or that they'd gone too far. In any case, in the blink of an eye, dozens of diviners were wiped out. Once the diviners were dealt with, the others landed by Yi Zichen's side. Pu Jingwan, Yang Jian, the great sage, and Xiao Yumei. Of course, they'd been by Yi Zichen's side this entire time. The Yao servants and the 20 rulers had gone off to take over the city. They'd have to wait for a while before they could get here. "You two were too violent, weren't you? Over a dozen diviner souls. If I refine their souls, I could sell them for quite a bit. If worst comes to worst, I'll just split some with you too. Big Sister Yumei, are you a Buddhist? They wanted to kill Yi Zichen, yet you just beat them back. If only you'd been a bit more ruthless." Pu Jingwan returned to Yi Zichen's side, still grumbling unwillingly. Xiao Yumei smiled warmly, but said nothing. Yang Jian and the great sage stood to Yi Zichen's left and right, staring intently at the Bai family members. They were dumbfounded. The Bai family members who'd been about to attack were dumbfounded. 14 diviners. From the moment they attacked to the moment they died, not even 10 breaths of time had passed. These were diviners. In some small family clans, diviners were the pillars of their clans, strong enough to be the clan's leader. In the outside world, they could even serve as the general of a city. Even in the Bai family, diviner experts had a fair bit of authority. They'd all been dealt with, and it had been so easy. Although Pu Jingwan hadn't attacked, based on how she'd said she'd refine diviner souls, it was clear that her strength was extraordinary. Rulers. All of them were rulers. Not bad. I thought you'd come alone, but it turns out you had help. Well, this is the Bai family. No matter how bold you were, you wouldn't have dared come here alone. But I still have to warn you, this is the Bai family. Do you really think you can? Before he'd even finished speaking, Bai Yulong's pupils constricted. Chapter 1409. Not long ago, Bai Yulong received news. Spirit City's defenses had completely escaped the Bai family's control, and a group of Yao experts had taken control of its foregate. None of the experts they'd sent had returned, and they hadn't sent back a single message. The clan elders were all in seclusion and didn't know what was going on, but someone had already gone to notify the clan elders. Only now did Bai Yulong look Yi Zichen in the eye. This person had so brazenly attacked the Bai family and said he wanted to take his life. This wasn't just empty talk. Whether it was the 4 experts by his side, or the way he'd seized the city. Just who are you? Bai Yulong could no longer remain as calm as before. As a direct descendant of the family, he knew full well how many troops the Bai family had deployed to defend Spirit City. Yi Zichen had taken control of the city's defenses so quickly, and his scouts hadn't been able to send back any information. From this, Bai Yulong could tell just how many people he'd sent to take over the city. There were also the few people behind him who could easily deal with more than 10 celestials, and those celestials were generally of high level or above. Then, it was obvious that they were rulers at the very least, and possibly even emperors. At first, Bai Yulong thought Yi Zichen's decision to come here on his own was reckless. But now, he was fully aware of the enormous power behind Yi Zichen. Just who was he? Bai Yulong couldn't help but wonder. Don't be fooled by his arrogance, but he was familiar with the heirs of some of the God Realm's major powers. The ones he couldn't afford to provoke had left a deep impression on him. He wasn't sure if he could provoke Yi Zichen, but from the looks of it, he was no ordinary person. At the very least, he belonged to a first-rate faction. But Bai Yulong had no recollection of him at all. You don't need to know who I am. Yi Zichen smiled coldly and covered his face with his right hand. Suddenly, 12 black and white wings unfurled from Yi Zichen's back. His wings stirred up the air, creating gales so fierce that even the roofs near the Bai family's ancestral residence were blown away. Just those wings alone were enough to put the Bai family's experts in a difficult position. The others watched in astonishment. Then, Yi Zichen removed his hands from his face. What was revealed was a pair of deep purple, demonic eyes. After that, a long sword appeared in his hand. The scabbard turned into a streak of golden light and embedded itself into the ground. The smooth blade of the sword shone with a piercingly cold light under the moonlight. The cold light was dazzling, and the 2 words, Xianyuan, were engraved on the hilt. Buzz. The body of the sword trembled and buzzed. He swung it downwards, and the sword chi shot out fiercely. The house below was instantly sliced apart by the sword chi and collapsed with a loud rumble. All you need to know is that I'm here to take your life. Swoosh. Yi Zichen flapped his wings, and with Xianyuan's sword in hand, he seemed to teleport. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Bai Yulong. He raised the Xianyuan sword and swung it down. The instant he moved, Pu Jingwan, Yang Jian, the great sage, and Xiao Yumei all attacked the Bai family clansmen. So fast! Bai Yulong sighed inwardly. Even with his eyesight, he'd only seen Yi Zichen's afterimage. By the time he came to his senses, Yi Zichen's sword was already right above his nose. He quickly retreated. A strand of silver hair fell to the ground. Yi Zichen's attack hadn't actually hurt Bai Yulong. Bai Yulong had reacted quickly enough, so his sword had only severed a few strands of silver hair. That wasn't a big deal. Setting aside his grudge with Bai Yulong, the fact that he'd been able to crush Shui Mo, who'd activated her bloodline power, was proof of his strength. If he could cleave Bai Yulong in half with a single strike, Yi Zichen believed that Jiang Wei and the others would have long since avenged Shui Mo. It was precisely because this guy was strong, so strong that they had no hope of victory. That was why they'd given up so easily and buried their hatred deep in their hearts. Yi Zichen couldn't help but nod in approval. He was strong, but that was all. Yi Zichen's gaze narrowed and he attacked again. Bai Yulong barely dodged Yi Zichen's sword. He clutched the strand of hair in his hand, his eyelids twitching. Fortunately, he'd reacted quickly enough. Otherwise, without the protection of divine power, he'd most likely have been cleaved in half. Before he could think too much about it, he saw Yi Zichen, Xianyuan sword in hand, charge at him again. Retreat, retreat, retreat. In the face of Yi Zichen's fierce attacks, Bai Yulong's only response was to retreat. Perhaps because Yi Zichen's attacks were too concentrated, Bai Yulong was flustered. He couldn't react in time, so all he could do was retreat to ensure his safety.
Who the hell are you? How did I offend you?
Perhaps there's some misunderstanding between us? Shouted Bai Yulong frantically as he retreated. Part of the reason Bai Yulong hadn't attacked yet was that he wanted to ease their relationship. He didn't know Yi Zichen's background, and his father had repeatedly warned him not to make enemies for the sake of the family. They were working for God Emperor Zhou Wu. If the Bai family made enemies, they'd make enemies for the God Emperor. It was already the end of the era, and the God Emperor had already pushed several of the 9 divine mountains into opposing factions. The Bai family couldn't push other first-rate factions into opposing factions. Bai Yulong was keenly aware that he'd acted in such a high-profile manner that he might inadvertently offend someone. But that didn't mean he couldn't make up for it. The family elders had yet to emerge from seclusion, so he had to at least delay until they did. Misunderstanding? Yi Zichen smiled wickedly. He found it hard to believe that, at a time like this, Bai Yulong would still think it was a misunderstanding. Even the diviner general had recognized him as Yi Zichen at a glance, but this young master of the Bai family still hadn't figured out the situation. The sound of a rain of swords filled the air. The Bai family clansmen and retainers could tell that this was the sound of experts at the Sky Supreme level and above flying through the air. A vast expanse of light blotted out the sky. Bai Yulong subconsciously turned his head and stared at the people who were flying towards them. He couldn't tell how many there were, but he could tell that there were at least tens of thousands of them. Furthermore, their cultivations weren't low. Even the weakest was a 7th stage Sky Supreme. There were quite a few diviners as well, and there were at least 6 rulers leading them. These people, could they be the ones who took over the city? Bai Yulong was terrified. He was sure that there were still a large number of experts guarding the city gates. Only a small portion of them had come. This was clearly a first-rate faction, but why couldn't he remember? No. Yao. Although there were a few with the aura of gods, most of them were Yao experts. If so many Yao invaded the city, the gods would definitely get wind of it. There was no way God Emperor Zhou Wu would allow them to enter Spirit City. Yao. Yao. Bai Yulong's mind raced as he watched the Yao experts descend upon him. The Yao Sealing Pagoda. These were definitely Yao servants from the Yao Sealing Pagoda. Otherwise, how could the Bai family not have heard of so many Yao experts appearing in the God Realm's territory? There was only one explanation. These Yao experts were Yao servants from the Yao Sealing Pagoda. In that case, this youth. Master. The Yao servant knelt in the air, his voice piercing through the clouds. Chapter 14:10. The sound of swords tearing through the air was naturally the Yao servants of the Yao ceiling pagoda. As the situation stabilized, the Yao servants and outsider rulers hurried over to help. There were 8 sovereigns in the lead, while the other sovereigns remained at the city gates. A total of 12 sovereigns were stationed in the 4 directions to control the city. Yi Zichen was one of those people they couldn't afford to offend. Word was out that the profound pavilion Xianji was his aunt, and the Society of Saints Star Altar's Lord of 7 Stars was his mother. Given their backgrounds, and the fact that Zhou Wu hadn't classified them as enemies, the Bai family had repeatedly warned him to treat them with caution. Bai Yulong also saw through Yi Zichen's identity, but he didn't understand. Rumor had it that Yi Zichen had only opened the first 2 floors of the Yao ceiling pagoda. When had he opened the 3rd floor? More importantly, Bai Yulong didn't recognize Yi Zichen at all. They'd never even met before, so why did Yi Zichen hate him so much? It's all taken care of. Yi Zichen ignored the revelation of his identity. Instead, he looked at the outsider rulers and Yao servant. We've taken full control of Spirit City's 4 gates, and we've left plenty of people at the gate. We were worried about your safety, so we rushed over to help, said the outsider rulers. Excellent. Yi Zichen nodded. Brother Yi. At that moment, Bai Yulong suddenly spoke up. Yi Zichen couldn't help but look askance at him. He'd assumed that Bai Yulong's tone would change after revealing his identity. Now it seemed that he'd changed, but he'd become even more obsequious. Brother Yi, there's definitely some misunderstanding between us. I don't know how I've offended you, but I don't know. Would it be possible to explain everything? That way, I'll have a chance to explain myself. My Bai family works for the God Emperor, and we're loyal to him. Lady Providence also works for the God Emperor, and she's his favorite subject. We're friends, not enemies. Can't we just talk things over? There's no need to make such a big fuss. Bai Yulong's words hit the nail on the head, but Yi Zichen laughed. His laugh was sinister and savage. Do you really not understand, or are you just pretending? Yi Zichen looked at Bai Yulong calmly. Misunderstanding? Even now, you still think it's a misunderstanding? Fine, then I'll let you know before you die. Do you remember the Battle of Geniuses? There's no need for us to do that. The profound pavilion's divine general, the bearded man, who was hiding outside, curled his lips resentfully. Judging from the current situation, Yi Zichen's side had an absolute advantage. Although he was at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, Yang Jian and the others were all experts who could fight against 10,000 people alone. Now that the Yao servants of the Yao ceiling pagoda and the sovereigns of the Outlands had arrived as reinforcements, their current advantage was gradually turning into victory. The god of wine continued to drink, the Axe King continued to sharpen his axe, and 13th Sister continued to touch up her makeup. Only the fan-wielding young master patted him on the shoulder. Don't think everything is so simple. What do you mean? The bearded man's eyes flashed. The Bai family has been nurtured by Zhou Wu for tens of thousands of years. If the young master were to use an unsealed Yao ceiling pagoda to exterminate them, Zhou Wu would be better off dead, said the gentleman. What do you mean? The elegant young master widened his eyes and sighed. 13th Sister put down the mirror and said, What 5th brother means is that the Bai family hasn't made their move yet. Right now, they're just a bunch of rotten fish and shrimps. The true elites have yet to come. Otherwise, why would Big Sis send us here? She's here for a vacation. 13th Sister's the smartest. 3rd brother. You. Call me 3rd brother, shouted the bearded man. The elegant young master shrugged angrily. He wasn't willing to let this thick-limbed but simple-minded person be his elder brother. Especially since he'd come with 3rd brother and 4th brother, yet they'd made him the youngest, 5th brother. So what you're saying is that the Bai family still has a backup plan, right? Asked 3rd brother. That's right, said 5th brother helplessly. Then how much longer do we have to wait? My sandbag-sized fists have already. Before 3rd brother could finish, he forcefully swallowed the rest of his sentence. 13th sister put down the mirror, while 5th brother tucked his fan behind his neck. 18, the last to join them, stopped sharpening his axe. Then they saw the god of wine stagger to his feet and burp, his wine gourd hanging from his waist. All of you, pack up. It's time to stretch. Even if Bai Yulong was slow, he knew what Yi Zichen was talking about. He'd only fought once in the entire Battle of Geniuses, and God Emperor Zhou Wu had sent him to test the Shui family's strength. It was also during that battle that he'd offended the Sea of Innocence. From then on, the Bai family and the Shui family stood on opposite sides. However, with the God Emperor's protection, the Shui family didn't dare act rashly. Even though he'd heavily injured Shui Mo, he could still live a carefree life. Now Yi Zichen had come looking for him, attacked the Bai family, and even mentioned the Battle of Geniuses. You understand? Laughed Yi Zichen. Since we've come this far, I'll help you understand. Shui Mo is from Skyspan, and coincidentally, so am I. Even more coincidentally, I'm on good terms with her. I heard you beat her pretty hard that day in the secret realm. She didn't even have a chance to fight back. As her best friend, I had to help her vent her anger. He understood. He understood completely. Suddenly, Bai Yulong remembered that he and Shui Mo were the only ones left in the secret realm. The second daughter of the Sea of Innocence had once tried to persuade him to withdraw from the competition. She said the sword in the secret realm was very important to her, and that she had a good friend who used swords. She wanted to give it to her friend. In order to make up for his losses, she was willing to give him resources that were as valuable as the sword. In the end, the sword ended up in Bai Yulong's hands, but he didn't take it as a trophy. Instead, he destroyed it right in front of Shui Mo, who still had a sliver of consciousness. He used the blade of his destroyed sword to stab Shui Mo's forehead and destroy her bloodline power. After that, he used the blade of the sword to pierce through her arm. Dark red blood dripped down the blade and onto the ground. She was on the verge of death. The Battle of Geniuses was suspended. Bai Yulong complied with the decision and didn't torture her any further. He grabbed Shui Mo by the head and walked out of the secret realm, his head held high, then slammed her to the ground. The profound pavilion's Lady Providence personally rushed over to treat her injuries, and Skyspan's Dean rushed over to treat her. Quite a few people had gathered around her. When they saw her wounds, they glared at her with resentment, but none of them dared approach. All they could do was clench their fists and curse inwardly. He was very pleased to enjoy their resentment and their incompetence. He looked like a victor, and his gaze was filled with disdain. He looked at them and smiled. Chapter 14:11. Yi Zichen ordered the slaughter in the calmest of tones. He didn't have any other reason. Perhaps many of the Bai family members were innocent, but that didn't matter anymore. At the end of the day, the Bai family belonged to Zhou Wu. They'd have to fight sooner or later. Death was inevitable. Giving the order at this time was merely pushing forward the time by a little. Yes, sir. The ruler of the outer realm and the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda shouted in unison, their voices filling the air. Just the sound of their voices was enough to make all the cultivators in Spirit City tremble. The sky gradually brightened. However, even though it should have been dawn, the sky was still hazy. The sky exuded a solemn and deep feeling. Through the clouds and mist, one could vaguely feel some light, but this light was obscured and was especially dim. Bai Yulong was shocked. He was shocked that he'd never guessed Yi Zichen and Shui Mo had such a relationship. He was shocked that Yi Zichen's faction was clearly on good terms with Zhou Wu. Even if they weren't on good terms, they weren't enemies. But now this was happening. Zhou Wu had ordered Bai Yulong to act ruthlessly in order to test the Sea of Innocence's bottom line. He'd also wanted to better understand the situation and prepare for the future. Before attacking, Zhou Wu must have known about Yi Zichen and Shui Mo's relationship, as well as who stood behind him. Zhou Wu had absolutely understood everything before doing this. In other words, he wasn't worried about Yi Zichen's faction at all. Or perhaps, was this also a test for them? In other words, the profound pavilion, which had always served the God Emperor's estate, was also on the Sea of Innocence's side? Or perhaps Yi Zichen's actions were his own, and had nothing to do with the profound pavilion or the Society of Saints. Bai Yulong had to admit that he'd panicked at first. The amount of information contained in this was too much for him to digest in a short time. But if he thought about it carefully, everything became much simpler. Yi Zichen had come for Shuemo regardless of whether his actions were of his own volition or the approval of his backer. He was standing against the Bai family. In a situation like this, his background was no longer important. If the profound pavilion and Society of Saints were on the Sea of Innocence's side, then so be it. In any case, they were enemies. Even if he died, it didn't matter. If Yi Zichen's actions were purely of his own volition, then he'd provoke them first. So what if he was injured? Just apologize. They were all working for the God Emperor, so how could his Bai clan be afraid of the profound pavilion and the Association of Saints? After sorting out his thoughts, Bai Yulong was no longer confused. He no longer racked his brains to resolve the conflict. Instead, he was like an unsheathed blade, radiating an unruly, vicious aura. His ghastly white teeth radiated cruelty, his crooked neck and his sinister eyes stared at Yi Zichen and the Yao servants behind him like a viper. By now, he was no longer hiding his cultivation. Earlier, out of fear of Yi Zichen's background, he'd been too cautious to harm him. Since he had already thought it through, there was nothing else for him to care about. How dare you! Bai Yulong roared angrily as he watched the extraterrestrial sovereigns and the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda about to attack. His handsome appearance contorted, and his entire face contorted with malevolence. His lifeless eyes, which had bags under his eyes, were now filled with viciousness. He glared at the demon servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, and a surging aura exploded from his body. Yulong, stand down. A calm, unhurried voice echoed through the air. Before long, a white-robed, middle-aged man walked out of the Bai family's inner courtyard. He stood on a blue lotus and walked to Bai Yulong's side. His appearance instantly doubled the pressure on the Bai family estate. Even the great sage, Yang Jian, and the others gradually retreated and cautiously approached Yi Zichen's side. Although only 7 or 8 minutes had passed since the great sage and the others had attacked, the pressure they felt instantly multiplied. Faced with these diviners and supremes, an emperor-level ruler was bound to slaughter them. The stench of blood was already thick, and the Bai family had suffered grievous casualties. Even so, the middle-aged man merely glanced at them. His eyes were unruffled, and he smiled calmly, hands clasped behind his back. I am the head of the Bai family, Bai Haoran. I've been in seclusion this entire time. It was someone from my clan who summoned me. Little friend, can you explain to me why you've come to my Bai family with such fanfare, slaughtered my clansmen, and threatened to take my nephew's life? What are your intentions? I also know who you are, Yi Zichen. He was the nephew of the profound pavilion's Lady Providence, and the son of the Society of Saints Star Altar's Lord of 7 Stars. My young friend, you should know that the Bai family works for the God Emperor. I wonder if Xianji and Star Lord Yi know about your actions? Do you have any respect for the God Emperor? Bai Haoran said in a clear voice. Good eloquence. Yi Zichen looked over and couldn't help but shake his head. Bai Haoran stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His gaze was mellow and his tone was elegant. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his white robe fluttered in the wind. He looked like an immortal, and his entire body exuded a noble aura. Yi Zichen, on the other hand, was brimming with killing intent. His right eye radiated a devilish charm. One was righteous while the other was evil. The visual contrast was intense. Are you the Bai clan's clan leader, Bai Haoran? This is a good name. Yi Zichen stared at Bai Haoran and snorted. But there's no need for you to say anything more. Just drag my mother and Auntie Xianji into this. There's no need to drag God Emperor Zhou Wu into this. This time, I came here to avenge my close friend. Butcher you my clansmen were not my intention. Since you, the clan head, have come here personally, I'll give you some face. I'm determined to take Bai Yulong's life. Give him to me, and I'll order my men to leave. How about it? Are you going to hand him over or not? Yi Zichen didn't know who Bai Yulong was, and he couldn't be bothered to find out. If he said he was the head of the Bai clan, then he was. Yi Zichen's goal in coming here was to take Bai Yulong's life. Now that he'd confirmed Bai Yulong's identity, no matter what the result was, he had to die. He'd said all that just now to give Bai Haoran face. He wanted to see what Bai Yulong's decision would be. If he handed him over, fine. If he didn't know when to back off, then he'd kill him as well. My little friend, you're quite aggressive, Bai Haoran laughed heartily. I only said so much to give you face out of respect for your mother and Auntie Xianji. I wanted to give you a way out, but you're still as arrogant as ever. And you even want me to hand over my nephew. Big brother, what's the point of saying so much to him? Even with the profound pavilion and star altar's support, do you think our Bai family is afraid of him? Roared a middle-aged man in purple robes. The other Bai family clansmen clamored even louder. Their clamor irritated Yi Zichen greatly. Yi Zichen's gaze narrowed, and his eyes flashed with cold light. Chapter 14:12. Up in the sky, Yi Zichen's patience gradually wore thin. He issued his final ultimatum. The outsider rulers and Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda were all ready to go. Everything was ready. It was as if the heavens were building up momentum for this solemn atmosphere. Suddenly, a few claps of thunder rumbled through the cloudy sky. The hazy radiance of the morning that was covered by the clouds and mist had also disappeared. The entire void was filled with a gloomy atmosphere. Should we go or not? The profound pavilion's divine generals hidden outside couldn't sit still any longer. The bearded old third's expression was the most urgent. He clenched his sandbag-sized fists so tightly that they creaked. Beneath his thick brows, his eyes were fixed on the empty space, and his lips were tightly pursed. The others looked at the god of wine. 18 clenched her axe, 13th sister took a sip of her rouge, and 5th brother pulled out a sash from somewhere and tied it around his head. Don't be fooled by the god of wine's drunken, befuddled look, but he was the one in charge and the one who had the right to speak. He looked like a drunkard, but he was more sober than anyone else. What? What's the rush? The god of wine's eyes were hazy, and his cheeks were red. Just wait a little longer. You bunch of youngsters are too impatient. You haven't even. What are you in such a rush for? Aren't we going to fight now? Said third brother. That doesn't mean we haven't fought yet. Right now, the Bai family still. They don't know the relationship between the profound pavilion and the god emperor's estate. From Bai Haoran's expression, it's obvious that he's not sure. He's still testing. If we go up now, wouldn't that be telling him that the profound pavilion has fallen out with the god emperor's estate? The Bai family. Are you sure we can handle them? Said the god of wine. Boss, not even you? Said 13th sister in astonishment. Of course Bai Haoran won't be a problem. I'm just worried about their patriarch. Big sister said he's no ordinary person. He's hidden from the heavens. Even she can't divine his depths, said the god of wine. Then are we just going to watch? Asked 5th brother. Let's wait and see. If they really start fighting, the rest of you go up. I'll keep an eye on their patriarch. If we don't fight, it's best if we wait for Big Sis to arrive. Old 8th who said that Big Sis and the others are rushing over here. Once our main forces arrive, the Bai clan will be nothing. We'll flatten them if we say so, said Wine God. Boss, you can speak more fluently now, said 13th sister. Really? I'll drink some more. As soon as he finished speaking, the god of wine raised his gourd and began to gulp down more wine. The Bai family's patriarch still exerted a lot of pressure on him. The god of wine didn't know when the old man would emerge from his seclusion, so he had to maintain his peak condition at all times and prepare to fight the Bai family's patriarch. The others nodded in agreement. They stared at the void, ready to take action. Brat, don't be too arrogant. This is Spirit City's Bai clan. How impudent! How dare you speak such arrogant words? You're courting death. Patriarch, what's the point of talking so much to him? Just kill him. The Bai family members were all enraged. The way they saw it, Yi Zichen was way too arrogant. He didn't take the Bai family seriously at all. All of you, shut up! Roared Bai Howren. Bai Howren's smile faded. He'd already given a junior like Yi Zichen plenty of face. Yet Yi Zichen still didn't know when to back down and insisted on taking his nephew Bai Yulong's life. As the head of the family and his uncle, Bai Howren had no face left. Before leaving, he'd asked God Emperor Zhou Wu, but he'd received no reply. This made him unsure what the profound pavilion and society of saints behind Yi Zichen were thinking. If he rashly attacked and injured Yi Zichen, the profound pavilion and society of saints would put pressure on him. He couldn't bear the consequences. Are you going to hand it over or not? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. Little friend, aren't you a bit too vicious? Bai Howren was still trying to beat around the bush. It seems you don't want to hand it over? Then, little friend, are you planning on openly robbing me? Bai Howren's gaze froze. With just your subordinates? What? Isn't that enough? Said Yi Zichen. Before he'd even finished speaking, countless figures suddenly appeared within the Bai family estate. All of them flew through the air, so dense they seemed to blot out the sky. The Yao servants in the Yao ceiling pagoda were all solemn. Yi Zichen, the great sage, and the others looked at the endless stream of Bai family clansmen. Based on their numbers, they were definitely outnumbered. Beneath his robes, Yi Zichen clenched his fist. Bai Howren said in a low voice, "It really isn't enough. Don't forget, this is Spirit City's Bai family estate." More and more Bai family clansmen flew through the air. By now Yi Zichen understood. The first group was nothing but a bunch of small fries. These were the true elites of the Bai family. They were all Sky Supremes and above, and there were quite a few diviners as well. There were also those standing behind Bai Howren, all of them rulers. There were also those leading the Bai family's army. Yi Zichen estimated that there were at least 40 rulers. This was the Bai family's true strength. They were on par with the divine mountains and holy land. Yet they had no fewer than 5 god emperors. In the future, Yi Zichen would have to face opponents like this. The tables had turned. Before, Yi Zichen had the advantage in numbers, but now he was at an absolute disadvantage. The situation was dire. At that moment, Bai Howren spoke up. "Little friend, I've already made concessions when you seized the city. I've never blamed you. You threatened to take my nephew's life and slaughter the Bai family, but I still gave you enough face. Even so, you still spouted such arrogant words. Yi Zichen, do you really think the Bai family is so weak that just anyone can provoke us? Don't say I didn't give you a chance. Take your people and retreat, and I'll pretend none of this happened." Another concession. Although Bai Howren had summoned his clansmen, he'd still made concessions. In truth, he wasn't actually going to attack Yi Zichen. He just wanted to use his influence to pressure Yi Zichen into retreating. At the end of the day, he didn't want to incur the wrath of the profound pavilion and society of saints. The way Bai Howren saw it, this much was enough. The situation was clear. If Yi Zichen wanted to take Bai Yulong's life now, it would be almost impossible. So long as Bai Yulong's thoughts were normal, he would retreat. Yi Zichen's eyes flashed as he watched the Bai family clansmen surround them. "Wei Rui, I'm here." The beautiful female leader of the Yao ceiling pagoda's Yao servants stepped forward. Wei Rui whispered a few words into her ear, then returned to the group. At the same time, Yi Zichen smiled and walked up to Bai Haoran. Chapter 14:13. Bai Haoran was in a good mood. He'd already guessed Yi Zichen's decision. Earlier, he'd worried that Yi Zichen would do something out of the ordinary in his anger. If that happened, it'd take him even more effort to calm the situation down. Now it seemed he'd been sensible. As he considered this, Bai Haoran's eyes gradually lit up. As expected, Yi Zichen was smart. He knew to make concessions now. A man had to learn to be flexible. Although many of the Bai family's members had died, they were all small fries. Bai Haoran didn't care at all. So long as Yi Zichen backed down, he could appeal to the God Emperor, who judged the Bai family on his own. Family head Bai. By now, Yi Zichen had his arm around Bai Haoran's shoulders. He sighed, as if he'd suddenly come to a realization. I'm very grateful to you for backing down time and time again. You've given me face, but... Bai Haoran wanted to hear more. The way he saw it, it didn't matter if he listened. Things had already come to an end. At most, he, the senior, would have to offer some guidance. Just as he nodded and smiled, he suddenly felt a cold sensation in his chest. He looked down and saw a bright silver dagger sticking out of his chest. Fresh blood flowed out of the wound. I told you, anyone who gets in my way will die. You didn't listen either.
You?
Yi Zichen had obtained this dagger on the 3rd floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. It was infused with flying serpent venom. He'd heard that the 5 Elements' great emperor had plucked off the head of the flying serpent clan and given it to a 3rd-floor artificer to refine. The dagger's poison could instantly spread through one's entire body. Anyone below the ruler level would die instantly. Experts below the mid-stage ruler level could use their divine power to delay death, but the effects were minimal for those above the ruler level. However, it could still numb their entire body. Yi Zichen's eyes flashed with vicious light. He gripped the dagger tightly and shoved it into Bai Haoran's chest. You've never cared about me, nor have you put up any defenses against me. You didn't even wear the most basic protective armor. Speaking of arrogance and conceit, between the two of us, who is the real arrogant one? The poison from the dagger spread from Bai Haoran's chest. In just a few breaths of time, black blood began to flow from his chest. His entire body was paralyzed and he could not move. His raised hand trembled and fell down. His lips squirmed, but he couldn't say a word. All he could do was glare at Yi Zichen as his vision gradually blurred. I'm sorry. I've already said that I will definitely take Bai Yulong's life. Bai Haoran's consciousness became blurry, and the spread of the poison made it impossible for him to think. Right now, he could only think about how he had lost. That was right. Now that the Bai family had appeared, if it had been anyone else, they would have followed Bai Haoran's excuse. No one would try to strike a stone with an egg. Even if they knew that it was a dead end, they would still make such a choice. His mistake was to underestimate Yi Zichen's determination. Bai Yulong must die. Anyone who stood in his way would die. Yi Zichen suddenly realized that it was actually quite fun to use underhanded methods at times. It was much more efficient than doing things openly. This young master really is ruthless. The bearded 3rd brother couldn't help but sigh. The divine generals had been monitoring the situation above with their divine senses. Yi Zichen's methods were naturally under their watch. Isn't it good to be ruthless? I like his methods very much. 5th brother laughed. No wonder he's Big Sis's nephew. Are you trying to say Big Sis is underhanded? I'll remember that. When we get back, I'm going to complain to Big Sis, snorted 13th sister. I didn't. 18, I didn't say anything just now, did I? 5th brother panicked. 18 was as silent as ever. She didn't respond. 5th brother scratched his head, smiled bitterly, and ran off to put in a good word for 13th sister. His methods were underhanded and ruthless. In fact, they were somewhat contemptible. However, the divine generals of the profound pavilion merely laughed. They didn't take it to heart at all. So what if it wasn't? who dared claim to have lived their lives with a clear conscience. Even divine generals had their fair share of underhanded methods. Showing mercy to your enemies was the same as being irresponsible. If they had to put it bluntly, they could say that Yi Zichen was a man of his word. Because he'd already said that anyone who stood in his way would die. Bai Haoran still hadn't handed him over, so Yi Zichen took care of him. It didn't matter how he did it. Stop messing around. The god of wine suddenly shouted. 5th brother and 13th brother, stop. You guys, don't just stand there. Get up there. It looks like we have to make a move. Some of the Bai family members had already sensed that something was wrong. Bai Haoran and Yi Zichen had gone over to talk in private. What was there to talk about? Furthermore, as soon as Bai Haoran went over, his body stiffened, and his behavior was strange. Some of the more attentive ones were just about to send their divine senses over. Family head! Big brother! The instant they sent their divine senses over, they discovered the dagger in Bai Haoran's chest, as well as the gurgling black blood. Yi Zichen smiled coldly, then gently pushed Bai Haoran back. Kill them! Yi Zichen roared. Wei Rui led the Yao servants of the Yao Sealing Pagoda and charged the Bai family. The outsider rulers followed suit. Judging from their reactions, they'd known beforehand. In contrast, the Bai family panicked at the sudden turn of events. Furthermore, they hadn't received any orders in advance. They faced a dense horde of Yao servants and the outsider rulers' assassins. The Bai family panicked. They didn't know if the family head was dead or alive, but the Yao servants had suddenly attacked. They clearly had the advantage in numbers, yet they'd chosen to flee or fight back in panic. Instantly, the sky above the Bai family estate descended into chaos. Family head! The Bai family experts rushed to Bai Haoran's aid. When they saw his injuries, their eyes reddened. You're seeking death. A few rulers stepped through the air, but the great sage and the others had long since sensed their arrival. They brandished their staffs and charged ahead. However, this time, the ones attacking weren't diviners. Although the great sage and the others had an advantage in terms of cultivation, they were still rulers. However, these people were sovereigns, and they were unable to withstand the combined attacks of so many sovereigns. Young master, we've come to help you. The profound pavilion's divine generals rushed over. With a shout, they joined the fray. Yi Zichen didn't recognize the profound pavilion's divine generals, but he could sense their goodwill. The great sage and the others could tell they were friends, not enemies. Although they'd never worked together before, at their level, they could coordinate well after a few rounds. Chapter 14:14. Blades flashed, swords flashed, and blood splattered across the sky. Even the slightest twitch of their noses was enough to smell the pungent stench of blood. Bai family clansmen fell from the sky one after another. Of course, the Yao servants in the Yao Sealing Pagoda suffered casualties as well, but most were only heavily injured. Their death toll was much lower than the Bai families. Yi Zichen's sudden attack caught the Bai clansmen off guard. The Yao servants had an absolute advantage, the Yao Sealing Pagoda. If they wanted to leave, they needed the master's permission, but if they wanted to enter, all they needed was a single thought. Once they were done, they could return to the Yao Sealing Pagoda to recover. The Bai family clansmen, who'd been on the verge of annihilating the Yao servants, could only watch helplessly as they disappeared. Then, numerous Yao servants fought back. How dare you! How dare you! Bai Yulong was dumbfounded. He watched as Bai Haoran's uncle's fate hung in the balance, then watched as Yi Zichen's Yao servants slaughtered the Bai family clansmen with no regard for their lives. How dare he! This was Spirit City's Bai family. This was the Bai family's main branch, not a branch of some other city. The situation was clearly tilting in the Bai family's favor. Why did Yi Zichen still order his subordinates to attack? Wasn't he afraid of death? From Yi Zichen's command, Bai Yulong could sense his determination. Yi Zichen was determined to take his life. Even though he knew they were doomed, even though they clearly had no chance of victory, he still made this choice. He was a madman. His subordinates were all madmen, a bunch of madmen who didn't care about their lives. No, I can't argue with these madmen. I can't. Bai Yulong was scared stiff. He was practically scared out of his wit. His eyes flashed with terror as he muttered to himself and ran back to the Bai family's inner hall. These people were all crazy. They didn't care about their lives. He didn't want to argue with these fugitives. He was tired. He wanted to go back and rest. In a few hours, the Bai family would definitely eradicate them. There was no need for him to worry about them. He wanted to go back and rest. He wanted to go back and rest. He didn't even look back as he dashed into the inner hall. Before he stepped through the door, he pulled out all the talismans he could use and slapped them against the door. He placed several seals around the room. In a few hours they'll all be dead, all dead. Bai Yulong, who was sitting on the bed, was restless. He looked outside through the window, and his lips were pale. From time to time, the corpses of a few Bai clansmen would fall from his courtyard, heavily smashing onto the ground, their skin and flesh mangled. Then, a few demon servants landed on the ground and searched their bodies. Bai Yulong, on the other hand, held his breath and squatted on the ground. He pretended not to see anything and squatted in the corner of the room, shivering. Actually, he wasn't weak, but he was scared out of his wits. At this moment, he was probably weaker than an Earth Supreme. Bai Yulong. Suddenly, a cold voice rang out from Bai Yulong's room. He couldn't be more familiar with that voice. It was Yi Zichen's. He stood up abruptly and looked at the door. The talisman was still there, and the restriction had not been broken. Illusion, it's all an illusion, Bai Yulong comforted himself. Just as he was squatting on the ground, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Bai Yulong, what are you doing squatting here? Bai Yulong looked up and saw Yi Zichen standing with his hands in his pockets, half bent and smiling at him. Bai Yulong retreated in terror until he bumped into the corner of the wall. You really are a clever little devil, said Yi Zichen with a smile. Yi Zichen pursed his lips into a smile. The Bai family is fighting to the death for you, but you snuck into your room. To tell the truth, I feel bad for Bai Howren. He lost his own life for the sake of his nephew. You killed Uncle Howren. Bai Yulong glared at him. Who knows? Whether or not he survives depends on himself, said Yi Zichen. If Bai Howren's cultivation was higher, the poison on the dagger would only numb him. It wouldn't kill him. But if his cultivation was lower, only death awaited him. How dare you? Do you have any idea what you're doing? Bai Yulong panted heavily. This is the Bai family. If you act so arrogantly, there's no way you'll survive. When my father comes out, when my great-grandfather and grandfather come out, all of you will die. All of you will die. Bai Yulong glared at him, his voice breaking from shouting. Is that so? Then I might have to act quickly. He raised the Xianyuan sword high into the air. Little young master, be careful. Suddenly, Yi Zichen felt a chill run down his spine. He forcefully changed the trajectory of the Xianyuan sword, tilting it to the left. The entire house collapsed, accompanied by a crisp clanging sound. The Xianyuan sword slipped from Yi Zichen's hands, spun in the air a few times, then stabbed into the ground. The person who'd appeared was none other than the god of wine. He used his body to block the rocks above him, then looked nervously down at Yi Zichen. Little young master, you're not. As soon as he spoke, the god of wine saw Yi Zichen in his arms and trembled. Little young master. This howl was heard by the divine generals fighting against the Bai clan hegemons. Boss's voice. OL-5 abruptly stopped, and the other divine generals followed suit. Something's wrong with that voice, and just now it sounded like little young master. The bearded OL-3 knit his brows. Let's go take a look. They glanced at each other, then immediately set aside the rulers and charged into the inner courtyard. Yang Jian, the great sage, and the others inexplicably sensed that something was wrong. Furthermore, the divine generals had left, leaving them behind to fight the rulers. They couldn't quite deal with them, so they followed them into the inner courtyard. Little young master. The god of wine, still holding Yi Zichen, cried out involuntarily. He looked up and ahead. In front of them stood a middle-aged man who bore a striking resemblance to Bai Yulong. He carried a longsword in his right hand and gripped Bai Yulong's shoulder with his left. Whoosh! Several air-piercing noises could be heard as the profound pavilion's divine generals rushed over, their bodies drenched in blood. Boss, what? OL-3 was just about to ask what was going on when he saw Yi Zichen in the god of wine's arms. His eyes widened. The other divine generals froze as well. They stared blankly at the scene. At the same time, the great sage and the others arrived as well. Yi Zichen. Xiao Yumei rushed to his side like a mad woman. Pu Jingwan did the same. They stared intently at Yi Zichen, tears streaming down Xiao Yumei's cheek. Zichen, how could this be? How could this be? Chapter 14-15. How could this be? Xiao Yumei knelt on the ground and looked at Yi Zichen's left cheek. The wound was so deep she could even see his bones. His left eye was also soaked in blood. She couldn't tell what had happened to it. Even more terrifying was that his left arm had been severed from the shoulder down. Fortunately, the god of wine had immediately sealed the nearby blood vessels. Even so, fresh blood continued to gush out of his severed arm. How could this be? Tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. By the time Xiao Yumei arrived, the god of wine had already handed Yi Zichen over to her. She carefully cradled Yi Zichen's head. When she looked at his left eye and severed arm, she felt heart-wrenching pain. He'd been fine just a moment ago. How could he have suddenly become like this? At that moment, Yi Zichen, who was in Xiao Yumei's arms, suddenly moved. He struggled out of her embrace and glared at the white jade dragon in the sky with his right eye. Bai Yulong's face paled. He trembled as he turned to look at the middle-aged man. Zichen. Yi Zi. Xiao Yumei, Yang Jian, and the great sage spoke practically simultaneously. Yi Zichen's wings fluttered and he reached out. Xianyuan. The Xianyuan sword, still embedded in the ground, trembled violently. With a hum, it soared into the sky and burrowed into Yi Zichen's hand. Yi Zichen clenched the Xianyuan sword and sneered. He licked the blood from his face, then glanced at his severed arm. Ah! Yi Zichen laughed coldly, then his gaze focused and overflowed with killing intent. He stomped the ground with his right foot, causing it to crack for dozens of meters. Then, he used the momentum to whip up a fierce gust of wind. Die! Yi Zichen's cry sounded like it came from the depths of the abyss. He hefted the Xianyuan sword and slashed forward. Dad, save me! Bai Yulong cried out involuntarily. The middle-aged man gently swung his sword forward. Scram! This is none of your business. Instantly, the Xianyuan sword flashed with golden light. Heaven-plundering stance. Boom! Golden sword energy slashed towards the middle-aged man, seeming as if it could split the heavens. Only then did the middle-aged man's expression change slightly. He muttered something, and the rapier in his hand glowed with a green light. Turn. It was clearly Yi Zichen's heaven-plundering stance, but when it came into contact with his rapier, it bounced back as if it had hit a mirror. A toast to the heavens. Rumble. An enormous wine gourd suddenly appeared in the sky, tilting downwards. The wine pouring down transformed into a waterfall that blocked Yi Zichen's path. However, the god of wine had underestimated the heaven-plundering attack. The wine waterfall had only slightly slowed the advance of the heaven-plundering sword Qi, but it had still managed to slice through the waterfall. Heaven-plundering 4 styles. Seeing that the sword energy was about to reach him, Yi Zichen gnashed his teeth and roared angrily, sending out a beam of golden sword light. The 2 sword Qis collided and exploded. From a distance, it looked like an exploding mushroom. The shockwaves from the explosion blinded everyone present. Even the Yao servants and Bai family clansmen fighting outside were sent flying several thousand meters. Yi Zichen, who was still in the sky, was smashed into the ground and coughed up a mouthful of blood. Yi Zichen used his hand to shield himself from the shock waves and watched helplessly as Yi Zichen crashed to the ground. His eyes instantly turned bloodshot. The lance buzzed, and the shock waves around it swept the gravel and fallen leaves far away. Yi Zichen licked his lips, grinned and pointed at Bai Yulong. His head. F*CKU. I'll kill you. Zichen. Xiao Yumei stumbled over to him. Yi Zichen's eyes were lifeless, and blood was seeping from his mouth. The god of wine and the divine generals hurried over as well. Pu Jingwan placed a finger on his neck. The explosion was too powerful. His heart arteries were severed, said Pu Jingwan. What are you just standing there for? Heart protection pills. Heart-nourishing pills, shouted the god of wine. At the god of wine's reminder, the divine generals started searching. Before long, OL 5 and 13 each produced a bottle of pills. The god of wine accepted them, hurriedly knelt and fed them to Yi Zichen. Fush! Yang Jian, lance in hand, instantly disappeared into the void, stirring up a fierce gale that sent the gravel flying. Then, his figure vanished from their line of sight. Bai Yulong's eyes darted back and forth as the middle-aged man grabbed him by the shoulder. He looked around uneasily. The middle-aged man's face was calm. He immediately swung the sword in his hand to the left, and the position where he had struck was exactly where Yang Jian had appeared. Die! Yang Jian's blade descended, but the middle-aged man expressionlessly used his sword to deflect it. Just as he was about to deal with Yang Jian, a sky full of illusory staffs attacked. It was the great sage. After fighting Yang Jian for so many years, the two of them had long since reached the point where they were on the same wavelength. When they joined forces, they didn't need to communicate at all. So long as the other made a single glance, a single movement, even a single breath, they knew exactly what to do. The great sage's staff had found a defensive blind spot. To their surprise, the middle-aged man's arm bent so much that it was almost twisted. Then, he shielded Bai Yulong behind him. Cough. The staff landed on Bai Yulong's body, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. His entire body withered. Hiss! The divine general couldn't help but gasp. From the looks of the middle-aged man and Bai Yulong, they seemed to be father and son. Even if they weren't, they were definitely direct relatives. He'd probably come here to save Bai Yulong, but he'd used Bai Yulong to block that blow for him. So vicious? After a simple exchange, Yang Jian and the great sage stopped fighting. When experts fought, it was easy to see how strong they were with just a few probing blows. The middle-aged man before them was no ordinary person. He wasn't like the rulers outside, who they could bully as they pleased. Even if the two of them joined forces, they wouldn't be able to take him down in a short amount of time. Furthermore, they didn't quite understand how he'd used Bai Yulong to block the staff. After taking a blow from the great sage, Bai Yulong was practically half dead. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, but the middle-aged man's expression remained indifferent. He took out a pill and stuffed it into Bai Yulong's mouth, then patted him on the back. Then, he looked at the great sage and Yang Jian with the same indifferent expression. "We can't waste time here," said Pu Jingwan. After feeding him the pill, Pu Jingwan checked Yi Zichen's pulse. "His condition is worse than we thought. Pills alone can't cure him. We have to find a place to treat him as soon as possible." "Let's return to the profound pavilion," said the god of wine. "All right." The others nodded one after another. Pu Jingwan transmitted her divine sense to the great sage and Yang Jian, explaining the situation. Chapter 14:16. From Pu Jingwan's tone, they could tell that Yi Zichen's injuries were severe. His treatment couldn't be delayed. During the treatment process, they needed to be absolutely safe. If they were interrupted, the situation would worsen. As a result, they couldn't make the decision to treat him in the Bai family estate. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda was a good place to go, but Yi Zichen was the divine artifacts master. They couldn't enter from the outside. Leaving the Bai family estate as soon as possible and rushing to the nearest profound pavilion was the best decision they could think of. Besides, Xianji had run the profound pavilion for tens of thousands of years. Even if the God Emperor wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality, he'd have to think twice. However, given the current situation, how could they just leave like that? Someone had to bring up the rear. You. Pu Jingwan pursed her lips. Leaving with them was for the best. Right now, the Bai family couldn't reverse the situation anytime soon because they had plenty of experts and manpower. But if the Yao servants and rulers of the outside left, even if Yang Jian and the great sage had heaven-defying methods, they wouldn't be able to break free. They couldn't deny their strength, but the Bai family wasn't a pushover, either. Never mind everything else, just the middle-aged man in the sky was a tough opponent. Let's go. Yang Jian glared at them and roared. The moment they'd made this decision, he and the great sage were prepared to die. Besides, given their abilities, the outcome was still unknown. Pu Jingwan had already said Yi Zichen's condition couldn't be delayed, so there was no need to waste any more time. Nonsense. Let's go. Pu Jingwan glanced at Yang Jian and the great sage, then used her divine power to support Yi Zichen's body. Xiao Yumei and the profound pavilion's divine generals stood guard and prepared to break free. The sword-wielding middle-aged man arched his brows, and his expression changed slightly. Are they leaving? Before he could even finish speaking, Yang Jian and the great sage stood at his sides, their auras overflowing. Don't move. With us brothers here, there's no way we'll let you stop them from leaving. Yang Jian's robes billowed without any wind. He indifferently drew a silver line through the air, and a faint image of the Milky Way appeared in his eyes. Black, shadowy aura emanated from his body, and his body began to distort. Bang! The middle-aged man threw Bai Yulong to the ground, sending up a cloud of dust. Even though he vomited blood from the fall, the middle-aged man did not even spare him a glance. Although his appearance had saved Bai Yulong's life, judging from his subsequent actions, Bai Yulong's life and death didn't really matter to him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used Bai Yulong to block the great sage's staff for him. Now, he didn't even hesitate to throw him down. Compared to ignoring Bai Yulong, the middle-aged man was rather interested in Yang Jian and the great sage. He glanced at them from the corner of his eye. Unlike Yang Jian's strange, empty darkness, the great sage's entire body emanated a golden holy light that seemed capable of dispelling all evil. The Rui Jingu Bang was also gripped tightly in his hand. The body of the Rui Jingu Bang glowed with a faint golden glow. Light and darkness filled both sides of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man in the middle smiled inexplicably. Killing Star and Holy Buddha? He was able to see through Yang Jian and the great sage with a single glance. It was clear that this middle-aged man was no ordinary person. If he was from the Buddhist domain, then so be it. After all, he did exist in this world. However, the killing star belonged to the North Star. It was difficult for anyone who wasn't a fallen star to know about it. Moreover, it was one of the auxiliary stars, the fated stars that no one knew about. Neither of them made a move. Although the middle-aged man was just standing there casually, there was no way to take advantage of him. Yang Jian and the great sage's positions were the same for the middle-aged man. Furthermore, they were the killing star and the holy Buddha. He didn't dare say that he was completely confident in taking them down. Time dragged on. Even though they hadn't made a move for a long time, they still maintained absolute vigilance. However, Yang Jian and the great sage were happy to accept this sort of delay. The longer they dragged things out, the better it was for them. Forget it. After a long standoff, the middle-aged man unexpectedly broke the stalemate. Actually, he had a cold personality and didn't like to interact with others. Normally, he wouldn't say a single word for half a month, but now that he was facing Yang Jian and the great sage, he was more than happy to chat with them. The middle-aged man sheathed his rapier at his waist. Yang Jian and the great sage couldn't help but frown. Neither of us can do anything to the other. Since you're happy to drag things out, I'm willing to play along. I am Bai Haoyu. May I ask who you two are? Yang Jian and the great sage fell silent. If you don't want to talk, then forget it. However, there's something I don't understand. One of you is the killing star, while the other is the holy Buddha. Just how did you manage to get along so well? The killing star of the previous master of the stars fought with the Buddhist domain to no end. The killing star of the previous master of the stars was the same. This was the truth. The killing star was of the dark attribute. His duty was to carry out all of the master of the stars' shady deeds. The Buddhist domain was the holy Buddha, and couldn't tolerate this sort of behavior. The two of them clashed, which was why neither of the killing stars of the previous generation was particularly fond of the Buddhist domain. In contrast, the Buddhist domain was the same. The great sage's body emanated the aura of extreme yang. How could Yang Jian and the great sage get along so well? Bai Haoyu simply couldn't figure it out. You still don't want to say it? Bai Haoyu sighed and shook his head. He was a man of few words, and in order to learn more, he had basically said everything he could in the past year. However, all he had gotten in return was silence. He felt like he had been wrong. When he sensed that Yang Jian and the great sage were still tense, Bai Haoyu lowered his eyes. Are you really going to drag this on? Yang Jian and the great sage remained silent. If I'm not mistaken, the two of you should be the strongest among all of you. Is it worth it for the two of you to stay behind to keep me here? How is it not worth it? Yang Jian said. The strongest member of the Bai family was Bai Haoyu. Although there were quite a few sovereigns outside, if Xiao Yumei and the others wanted to charge out, they wouldn't be able to stop them. The only person who could pose a threat to them was Bai Haoyu. No matter how they looked at it, it was a win-win situation for them. How could Bai Haoyu not know what Yang Jian and the great sage were thinking? However, he remained calm and unhurried. From his expression, it seemed like he didn't want to get involved in the affairs of the outside world at all. Could it be that he didn't want to get involved in the Bai family's affairs? Could it be that the slaughtered Bai family members didn't matter to him? Could it be that he was only here to protect Bai Yulong? That was possible, but it was extremely unlikely. If so, why would he dare to continue wasting time here? You might be oversimplifying things, Bai Haoyu said after a moment's hesitation. After a moment of hesitation, Bai Haoyu said, there are two old geezers out there who are even more difficult to deal with than I am. Chapter 14-17. Boom. A deafening explosion rocked the heavens. Everyone in the inner courtyard felt their ears ring when they heard it. Yang Jian and the great sage's expressions froze, and they looked off into the distance. Before long, they saw several sky-blotting hand seals slam down, and the god of wine, gourd at his waist, shot into the clouds. Monkey, I'll leave this to you. Yang Jian roared, preparing to rush forward to help. Bai Haoyu didn't try to stop him. Instead, he unsheathed the rapier at his waist. Then, he saw Yang Jian, who had just left, turn around and slash down with the long saber in his hand. Ding! The rapier easily deflected Yang Jian's blade. The great sage couldn't help but frown and look at the smiling Bai Haoyu. He'd clearly left, but he'd turned back. It seemed. They couldn't leave. It wasn't easy to stall you, Bai Haoyu said. How could I just let you go? While we were fighting, I set up restrictions. It's more than 10,000 meters wide. That's more than enough for you two to use. Bai Haoyu stood proudly in the sky and chuckled. Actually, we've been fighting outside for quite a while. You just didn't know because of the restrictions. Yang Jian and the great sage were both anxious and frustrated. It seemed that the situation outside was far more serious than they were. Teeth clenched, Yang Jian looked down at the ground, then blurred into motion and reappeared next to Bai Haoyu. He grabbed Bai Haoyu's neck with his left hand and held his lance against it. Let us leave, or else your precious son is going to die. What's the meaning of this? Bai Haoyu said. You were the ones trying to stall me. How did I become the one trapping you? Cut the crap. If you want your son to live, then hurry up. With that, Yang Jian pressed his blade deeper into Bai Yulong's neck. Blood began to ooze from the wound. Father! Bai Yulong wailed, and Yang Jian pressed his knife against Bai Yulong's neck like a desperate man. However, then just kill him. He's just a son. He can't be used to negotiate with me. Bai Haoyu's expression was indescribably calm. From start to finish, he hadn't even looked at Bai Yulong. Judging from his indifferent expression, he really didn't care whether Bai Yulong lived or died. Damn it! With a thud, Bai Yulong was flung into the room. This Bai Haoyu really was going to be a bit difficult to deal with. In terms of strength, he was no weaker than Yang Jian and the Great Sage when they teamed up. Not only that, but this guy was still as stubborn as ever. Even when a knife was pressed against Bai Yulong's neck, he didn't show any signs of emotion. Suddenly, Yang Jian looked up and saw the Great Sage nodding at him. Looks like that's the only way. The Great Sage gripped the Erlang lance tightly in his hand and raised his Jingu Bang, brazenly attacking. At the main gate of the Bai clan, the Yao Sealing Pagoda's Yao servants and the extraterrestrial sovereigns had already met up with Xiao Yumei and the others. But now, he was surrounded by Bai clansmen. While Xiao Yumei tended to Yi Zichen, who was coughing up blood, Pu Jingwan and the others had already charged into battle. Scram! The bearded third brother wore a pair of boxing gloves, punching away the surrounding Bai family members. The cold-faced 18 also carried a battle axe that flashed with cold light, like a soul harvester, harvesting these fearless Bai family cultivators who charged forward without fear of death. The fifth brother sat cross-legged in the sky, playing a short flute. His demonic tune filled the air. The beautiful 13th sister was surrounded by a green mist. She held a medicine bottle between her fingers, and poison filled the air. All of you, get out of my way! Pu Jingwan's movements were the loudest. No one would have guessed that such a beautiful woman would be so ferocious in battle. The outsider rulers fought with all their might, but there were simply too many of them. There was no way to break through. For a moment they were like cornered beasts. An hour earlier. Let's go. Sensing Yang Jian and the Great Sage's determination, Pu Jingwan decisively decided to leave. Although some Bai family clansmen tried to stop them, there were 7 rulers on their side. It was impossible to stop them. When they arrived outside, the Yao servants and rulers of the outside noticed Yi Zichen's condition, and they all looked over. Then, they drew closer and tried to break out of the encirclement. Who would have thought that the Bai family, who seemed to have been scared out of their wits, would actually launch a counterattack at this time? It was as if they'd received orders. Everything was in perfect order. Yi Zichen's side had the upper hand mainly because Bai Haoran's injuries had panicked the Bai family. The elders were either busy healing Bai Haoran or attacking Pu Jingwan and the others. No one was giving them orders at all. For a moment the Bai family was in disarray. The Yao servants of the Yao Sealing Pagoda, on the other hand, had a plan in mind, so they naturally had the upper hand. But it was undeniable that even though the Yao servants had seized the initiative, the Bai family still had the advantage in numbers. So long as they regrouped, Yi Zichen's side wouldn't be enough. As they broke out of the encirclement, Xiao Yumei and the others sensed that something was wrong. As time passed, the Yao servants suffered more and more casualties, but their attempts to break out of the encirclement were stalled. Do you think the Bai family is a place you can come and go as you please? All of you, stay here. At that moment, 2 sage-like elders appeared in the sky. When the Bai family saw them, it was as if they'd been injected with adrenaline. Their attacks became several times fiercer than before. The elders of the Bai clan also flew over to block their path of retreat. You've really come at the wrong time, cursed the god of wine. The profound pavilion's divine general's expressions froze. They knew exactly what the god of wine's cursing meant. Do your best to break out of the encirclement or defend your positions. Just don't let the young master get injured. Big Sis and the others are already on their way. Hold on. Boss, those two old geezers. Let me go face them. The god of wine wrinkled his nose and lifted the gourd at his waist. He kept pouring the wine from the gourd into his mouth. He wiped the corner of his mouth and burped. Then, with a boom, he stepped into the sky and met the two elders head-on. The god of wine hung from his waist, his face flushed red as he belched and drank. I'll sing to my wine. Boom, boom, boom. Whether it was above the clouds, in the inner courtyard, or at the main gate of the Bi-Clan, the rumbling sounds could be heard without end. There wasn't a single cultivator to be seen in Spirit City. At first, there were a few who dared come out to take a look, but when they sensed so many rulers fighting, they didn't have the courage to watch. In truth, they wanted to leave the city, but the fighting continued outside. In the end, they could only obediently stay in their rooms and listen to the explosions outside. Even though they were holed up in their rooms, they could still smell the stench of blood in the air. Outside, the sky was dyed crimson. Chapter 14:18. High above the clouds, the god of wine had retreated 100 meters away, his eyes fixed on the scene in front of him. He panted heavily. His clothes had been ripped to shreds. Blood flowed from his shoulders, down his arms, and dripped from his fingertips. He cut a sorry figure. Ha! The god of wine took another ragged breath. In just 100 breaths of time, he'd exchanged more than 100 blows with the two elders. He'd maintained a tough, aggressive stance this entire time, but judging from his current situation, it was clear that attacking by force didn't give him much of an advantage. He had to attack by force. As soon as the two by-family patriarchs appeared, the god of wine sensed their powerful auras. Enveloped in their auras, the god of wine felt like he was facing off against primordial beasts, while he himself was a tiny skiff in the midst of a tempest. The two beasts stared down at him. The fear in the depths of his heart made him tremble. Even though he was extremely drunk, he still didn't think that he could fight against one of these two people, let alone two people standing in front of him. But he couldn't retreat. As a veteran of the battlefield, he knew better than anyone that advancing was his last resort to maintaining his mental defenses. If he retreated even a single step, his heart would be mercilessly invaded, and he'd be plunged into an abyss of terror. Even after 100 years, or even 1,000 years, he'd still be shrouded by their shadows. Whether it was for his courageous Tao heart, or for the sake of Yi Zichen and the others, who were in dire straits, he had to face these two insurmountable mountains with the most resolute attitude. Unfortunately, the goddess of luck wasn't on his side. Although he'd known he'd lose, he hadn't expected to lose so thoroughly. He'd attacked with all his might, but he hadn't left a single mark on his opponents. Not even a single drop of blood, a single drop of the god of wine's blood. Not even a drop. He examined his body with his divine awareness. The meridians in his right arm had all been destroyed. The divine infant in his dantian was dispirited, no longer as nimble as it used to be. The wine gourd at his waist was empty. Before he'd started fighting, he'd already filled it to the brim. He didn't have much divine power left, and his body was in tatters. He faced the two by-family patriarchs, who were still in peak condition. Furthermore, the god of wine was sure that, despite his ferocious attacks, they hadn't used their true strength. Follow him. Rather than saying they were exchanging blows, it would be more accurate to say that they were toying with one another. I know you. They understood the god of wine's current situation even better than he did. They knew that the god of wine was like a cat with its nails clipped. He no longer posed even the slightest threat, and all that was left of him was entertainment for all to enjoy. If they wanted to take his life, it would be as easy as taking something out of their pocket. There was no hurry to kill him. When they emerged from their seclusion, the outcome had already been decided. Those who came to the Bai family to seek trouble could not escape death. Now, they were more than happy to know more information that they cared more about. You were the first to follow that girl, Xianji. You're also her direct descendant. Now that you've come to the Bai family to stir up trouble, does that mean Xianji is no longer serving the God Emperor? Or is it your own idea to come here? That's not very likely. They are Xianji's most loyal people, said another ancestor. The two ancestors chuckled and said nothing more. They looked at the god of wine. Although they already had some inkling of what was going on, they still wanted to hear it from the god of wine's own mouth. Heh! The god of wine laughed coldly. This might be your last hope of survival. Cultivation is a heaven-defying process. It's not easy to reach your current realm. Besides, my questions won't affect your loyalty to Xianji. If I wanted to, I could have gotten the information from the God Emperor himself. You're just revealing it to me in advance, said the ancestor. The Bai ancestor spoke slowly. Even now, the Bai family had yet to receive a reply from the God Emperor, Zhou Wu. However, the Bai ancestor's thinking was different from Bai Haoran's. Bai Haoran had gone to ask because he was truly wary of the profound pavilion and didn't dare act rashly. The Bai family's ancestor was simply curious and wanted to learn about it in advance. Then go ask the God Emperor. The god of wine grinned hideously. Up in the clouds, the Bai family's ancestor's expression didn't change. However, a cool breeze swept through the sky, dispersing the surrounding clouds. Then, he raised a hand. Then go. If he knew, he knew. If he didn't, he wouldn't force the issue. Suddenly, a heaven-shaking handprint appeared above the god of wine's head and slammed down viciously. The divine generals and Pu Jingwan, who were locked in combat with the Bai family clansmen, sensed the danger descending upon them and hurriedly retreated. Boom! The handprint slammed into the ground, razing everything within 5 kilometers of the Bai family's territory to the ground. Turbulent waves of energy toppled the surrounding buildings, and all of the Bai family clansmen within range of the handprint died horribly. Although the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda had immediately retreated into the tower, some of the slower ones died to the handprint as well. The Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda had suffered heavy losses. Excluding those who had returned to the tower, there were less than 1,000 Yao servants left outside. The survivors stared at the flattened Bai family's territory with lingering fear. Just this one attack alone was enough to fill the divine generals with a profound sense of helplessness. Pu Jingwan, who had come from the first era to the third era, felt such pressure for the first time. She'd been born relatively late. By the time she was born, the outside's power structure had already transcended. She'd only heard about it from some of the older generation. In the primordial era, when gods, Yao, and demons ruled the world, there were innumerable experts. She'd never understood what kind of experts those seniors referred to. At the time, she was already an outstanding talent in the outside. She'd once wondered how strong the people of the primordial era could be, but how much stronger could they be? That was, until she followed Yi Zichen to the god realm of the third era, and met Xianji. Xianji was the first person she couldn't see through. She quietly committed her to memory, until she saw Bai Haoyu again and sensed the handprint's power. No matter who they were, she knew she was no match for them. Is this the primordial era those seniors spoke of? Pu Jingwan gnashed her teeth and clenched her fist. Her path in the outside had been smooth sailing. She was a proud daughter of heaven. No matter who she faced, she'd never felt so powerless. She glared up at the sky, but at that moment, the divine generals of the profound pavilion shouted urgently, "Boss!" The divine generals were stunned by the handprint's power, but when they probed the area with their divine senses, they saw the first divine general, the god of wine, his pupils dilating. His body was charred black. The divine generals rushed toward the god of wine, their eyes bloodshot. Along the way, the Bai family clansmen surrounded them. Scram! Chapter 14:19. Impossible! The profound pavilion's divine generals couldn't believe that the person there was the god of wine. Among them, The god of wine had the highest cultivation and was the closest to their eldest sister. After drinking, he was almost undefeatable. The two by-family patriarchs who'd appeared earlier had given them a lot of pressure, but they didn't believe that the god of wine would lose. He was an ever-victorious general. Whenever the profound pavilion went on a mission, he could solve any problem that the other divine generals found troublesome. For example, 1,000 years ago, an imperial lord demon had appeared on the southwest divine mountain. The 3 divine generals Xianji had sent had all returned with heavy injuries, and the experts from the southwest divine mountain had also returned wounded. Xianji had ordered the god of wine to go, and in less than 3 days, the imperial lord had been captured alive. There were too many similar situations. In the divine generals' hearts, Xianji was their eldest sister, and the god of wine was their eldest brother. As long as he took action, the divine generals would feel safe. How could he have lost? This was definitely fake. Perhaps that person only resembled the god of wine, not the god of wine himself. But they had to confirm it. Get out of my way. Among the divine generals, Old Third was the closest to the god of wine. When he'd first entered the profound pavilion, he'd still been a brat, just like Old Fourth and Old Fifth. He'd experienced the impetuousness of youth before. Back when he was still a Sky Supreme and trying to break through to the diviner realm, he'd suffered several setbacks. Everyone else who'd entered the profound pavilion had already broken through. Old Ninth, who'd been the most talented but had died on a mission, had become a ruler. He'd been impatient and had almost gone astray. The god of wine had accompanied him day and night, chatting with him and imparting his insights without reservation. Later, he'd thought about worshipping the god of wine, but the god of wine had preferred to call him brother. But from the moment he stepped into the Deva realm, or perhaps from the moment he was at his lowest point, when the god of wine, who had become a sovereign, lowered himself to his knees and had a long talk with him, he had come to view the god of wine as his benefactor and master. He naturally didn't believe that the god of wine would lose, but the person he suspected was lying in front of him. How could he not be impatient? All of you die. The bearded Old Third's eyes were bloodshot. In order to reach the god of wine as soon as possible, he'd given up on defense and charged forward. The depletion of his divine power and the exhaustion of his spirit caused his movements to gradually slow down, and wounds began to appear on his body. But he didn't care. Ignoring the pain on his body, he punched the Bai-clan members in front of him. A silver light flashed. Pooh! His chest took a solid stab, and then a silver light flashed. Blood spurted out of his right hand, which was wearing a glove. Old Third. Ol 5 watched helplessly as Ol 3's hand was chopped off. Then, another palm struck the top of his head. He raised his piccolo and shouted wildly, but at this moment, humph! A muffled groan came from the tip of his nose. He lowered his head and saw a long sword piercing through his chest. Blood dripped down his back as he slowly raised his head. The first thing he saw was the Bai-clan hegemon's cold, arrogant smile. Third. Bro, the jade flute in his hand slowly fell from his hand, and blood continuously flowed out of his mouth. Third brother, fifth brother. 13th sister bit her lips. She reached into her bosom to take out the poison. She'd used up all her poison. She was a poison expert, a type of apothecary, but her own combat skills were lacking. Without poison, she was like a magus without mana. She's used up all her poison. Go. The Bai-clan members pressed forward. Of course, having suffered at 13's hands before, they didn't actually charge in recklessly. Instead, they probed her, one step at a time. After confirming that she really didn't have any poison and wasn't a trap, the Bai-clan members didn't hesitate and charged forward. Cough. A mouthful of blood splattered onto 13's face. She looked up and saw 18 using his body to block their blade. Several long swords stabbed into his body, and he was covered in blood. 18. 13's eyes flashed as she sobbed. At that moment Pu Jingwan, who had rushed over to help, was struck in the back as well. She gritted her teeth and forced the surrounding Bai clan members to retreat, then grabbed 13's arm and headed towards the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. The Yao servants, having received Xiao Yumei's orders, were slowly closing in on them. "Ha ha, how pitiful!" A cold laugh appeared in the sky, and the Bai clan patriarch slowly descended from the sky. "It's rare to see someone so heavily injured like this." He shook his head and chuckled as he watched Pu Jingwan try to fight her way out of the encirclement. "She's just struggling on the brink of death," said another patriarch. Then, the patriarch flicked his finger in the air. 13th sister's pupils constricted. She pushed Pu Jingwan away with all her might, but a finger-sized hole appeared in her shoulder. "Are you all right?" Pu Jingwan asked in concern. She knew that 13 had just saved her life. If she hadn't risked her life to push her away, that finger would have pierced her heart. 13 shook her head, then looked at 3rd bro, 5th bro, 18 and the god of wine. She suddenly thought back to when they'd first set off. Back then, they'd been laughing and joking. With the god of wine present, they didn't think their mission would be too dangerous. The god of wine had been defeated. Even if she didn't want to believe it, when she saw the two patriarchs appear, she was certain that the person below them was the god of wine. 3rd bro, 5th bro, and 18 had all been defeated. She was the only one left. But look at the situation before her. There were less than 1,000 Yao servants left in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Although the outsider rulers were still present, they wouldn't be able to hold out for long. Meanwhile, the Bai family clansmen continued to swarm towards them. There was no end in sight. The outcome was already set in stone. They were finished. Big Sister was hurrying towards Spirit City. They probably wouldn't be able to wait until she arrived. "You're in the way." The patriarch's eyes flashed, and he waved his hand at Pu Jingwan. At that moment, a wall of wind appeared in front of Pu Jingwan. Then, she saw Xiao Yumei tap lightly into the air, her expression fierce, her hands in front of her. "Why are you here?" asked Pu Jingwan. "How could I not be here?" Xiao Yumei laughed. After blocking the patriarch's shockwave, she retracted her hand and stared intently at the patriarch. "Then Yi." As soon as she said that, Pu Jingwan saw that Yi Zichen had already been handed over to the Yao servants. The other Yao servants gathered around them. "Don't give up," said Xiao Yumei suddenly. "We haven't lost yet, and they haven't truly won. Right now we should be on the brink of despair, but at least we're still alive, aren't we?" "Yes." She admitted it. Chapter 14:20. In the wilderness between Heavenly God City and Spirit City, Xianji and the other mighty figures of the divine mountains and sacred lands occasionally disappeared into the void. When they reappeared, they were thousands of meters away. Within 100 breaths of time after they left, the sound of a rain of swords rumbled in the void. Hubatsi led the profound pavilion's army out in full force. "Did you manage to contact him?" "Before, we could contact him, but now we can't." "I'm afraid he's in trouble," said Xianji, her brows furrowed. He had been made a fool of. For Bai Yulong to return to the Bai family at this time, it was very likely that God Emperor Zhou Wu had ordered him to do so. Xianji had been too idealistic. She hadn't expected this. "Have the people from the Four Directions Palace gone over?" "I've already ordered them to hurry to Spirit City, but as you know, my men are still stationed in Victorious Return City. They're even further from Heavenly God City than they are from Heavenly God City. My men can't be counted on. They can only serve as a deterrent," Baiyan said. "Qinyan, you're—" As soon as she opened her mouth, she didn't continue. Even the people from the Four Direction Palace could not make it in time. The fiend race was only stationed at the borders of the divine race. How could they make it there? Moreover, such a large number of demons entering the divine race was already a sign of war. Everything depended on them and the people from the profound pavilion. "You have to hold on." Xian Ji disappeared into the void again. She gritted her teeth and said, 1 hour, just 1 more hour and we'll be there. Less than 1,000 people against tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of by clansmen. The Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda looked around solemnly. They could actually enter the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. It was true that the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda were absolutely loyal to their owners. The wielder held the demon servant's lifeline. As long as he had the slightest thought of killing it, the demon servant would be reduced to ashes. The demon servant's life was threatened, so he had to be loyal to him. However, Yi Zichen was on the verge of death, and judging from the current situation, he didn't seem to have any hope of survival. They could just return to the tower and stay alive. Just like before, a portion of the demon servants who had returned because they were afraid of death, and the ones who remained here now. They were all prepared to die with Yi Zichen and company. As long as there was a single breath left. Xiao Yumei's words seemed to ignite everyone's faith. 13, who was on the verge of despair, turned to look at Xiao Yumei and Pu Jingwan. They were clearly both women, but Pu Jingwan had already chosen to fight. Xiao Yumei's, "I still have 1 breath left," roused everyone's spirits. She had never lowered her head to anyone else. This was also the main reason why she was able to enter the ranks of the Profound Pavilion's divine generals as a poison master. Just because he had used up all the poison he had concocted and his elder brother's lives were unknown, he became disheartened. This wasn't her. As a poison master, she didn't have much combat experience and was the weakest among the divine generals. But when she first entered the Profound Pavilion and received the title of Divine General, she had fought her way up, step by step. Later, both Xianji and herself felt that she had a unique talent for concocting medicines. He became a poison master. Could it be that he really couldn't lift his sword after using poison for so long? All of a sudden, 13 raised his head up high. She could. Even though she hadn't crossed swords or spears for a long time, the memory of the first battle had always remained in her heart. Even though she was weak among rulers, she was far stronger than diviners. Their gazes have changed. The Bai-family patriarch arched his brows. Just now, their gazes had been filled with despair. Now, however, their eyes burned with the desire to fight. Just because of that one sentence. Did she still have 1 breath left? It's too late. It was good to be able to fight, but it was a bit too late now. Whether it was in terms of experts or numbers, the Bai family completely crushed Xiao Yumei's group. You. At that moment, the patriarch suddenly furrowed his brows and looked at Xiao Yumei. You're Xiao Ting's eldest daughter, aren't you? What? Xiao Yumei didn't know what the patriarch was getting at, so she couldn't just nod. She wouldn't admit that she was Xiao Ting's enemy. If they were friends, she'd rather just nod and make them feel a little apprehensive. There should be no mistake. The patriarch looked her over, then nodded. Xiao Yumei didn't respond. Afterwards, the 2 patriarchs fell silent. Xiao Ting's daughter isn't easy to deal with. It's a bit troublesome. Back then, Xiao Ting said he wanted to erase her name from the family tree, but in the end, he didn't. Plus, he doted on her a lot. After a moment's thought, he continued, "Why is she here? How troublesome. Forget it, let's just ignore her. Why hasn't little Yu finished yet? It's not like you don't know little Yu's personality. Besides, the auras coming from that side are a bit stronger than ours." In truth, these 2 patriarchs were the ones Bai Yulong had mentioned earlier. His grandfather, Bai Jinxing, and his great-grandfather, Bai Mingli. Of your sons, little Yu is the most hard-working, but his personality. Bai Mingli sighed. Hurry up and take care of things here. Little Yu might be a bit impatient over there. It's easy to deal with them, said Bai Jinxing. Bai Jinxing said, from the looks of it, this farce should have been caused by that young man over there. These people can also tell that they have gathered for him. Kill him, and everything will be over. As for the others, leave some alive. We don't know the exact situation with Xianji and the God Emperor yet. We'll leave her and Xiao Ting some face. Bai Mingli grunted in acknowledgement of Bai Jinxing's plan. He reached out. Xiao Yumei, who'd been staring intently at the Bai family patriarchs this entire time, suddenly frowned. She erected an energy wall around her, but to her surprise, his hands brushed past it. Zichen. Xiao Yumei reached out and grabbed him. Bai Jinxing frowned. Don't think that just because you're Xiao Ting's daughter I won't dare touch you. Xiao Yumei said nothing. She simply slapped forward. Bai Jinxing's gaze turned cold. He didn't touch Xiao Yumei because he wanted to give Xiao Ting face, but he didn't have to. Xiao Ting was the Lightning Emperor, but the Bai family wasn't afraid of him. Furthermore, their families didn't really have much to do with each other. Since Xiao Yumei didn't know when to back down, Bai Jinxing might as well deal with her first. He thrust his hand forward, his fist crushing the air with a deafening rumble. When the other members of the Bai family saw the patriarch's attack, they regrouped and attacked the Yao servants. If you don't know when to back down, you'll die. Bai Jinxing's fist descended with the force of 1,000 caddies. Pu Jingwan stepped forward to help, but Bai Mingli retaliated. At that moment, a hand grabbed his arm. A figure appeared in front of Pu Jingwan, blocking Bai Mingli's attack for her. Don't touch her. It was a voice that seemed to come from the depths of the abyss. Bai Jinxing's expression froze. Xiao Yumei and Pu Jingwan jerked their heads around. Chapter 14:21. Everyone was astonished. Yi Zichen suddenly woke up. Pu Jingwan and Xiao Yumei stared at his majestic back, their eyes filled with shock. However, Xiao Yumei's eyes were filled with even more joy than astonishment. Zichen, you're awake. Xiao Yumei called out his name in delight, but Yi Zichen, who was standing just half a meter in front of her, acted as if he couldn't hear her. His gaze was fixed on Bai Jinxing, and his hand was tightly gripping his arm. In contrast to Xiao Yumei's delight, Pu Jingwan furrowed her brows when she saw this. As a bounty hunter in the outside, she spent 80% of her time out on missions. She was bound to get injured on missions, so in her spare time, she studied medicine. As time went by, her medical skills had earned her a reputation in the outside. She was certain that Yi Zichen's injuries were severe. His heart was damaged, his meridians were broken, and his internal organs had deviated from their original positions. Injuries like this couldn't be healed with just a few pills. He'd have to receive systematic treatment first. Before his injuries healed, never mind waking up, he'd be hanging on the edge of a cliff. But now, he'd woken up, taken by Mingli's attack for her, and grabbed Bai Jinxing's arm with his bare hands. What kind of figures were these two ancestors? Even the god of wine, drunkenness, couldn't last more than 100 moves against them. Furthermore, Pu Jingwan was an emperor-level ruler. There was no way Bai Mingli hadn't sensed her. Bai Mingli's attack couldn't have suppressed her casually. Yi Zichen was at the diviner level, yet he'd taken it head-on and wasn't injured in the slightest. How could he do this? The two Bai family patriarchs' expressions grew solemn. Yi Zichen's eyes shone with a purple light, like a pillar of light. It was terrifying, and the illusory figure behind him. The illusory figure's head reached the sky and his feet touched the ground. Just like Yi Zichen's, his eyes glowed with purple light. A surging pressure emanated from the illusory figure. Anyone who met its gaze would feel their temperature plummet, as if they'd fallen into a bottomless abyss. Bai Jinxing's senses were the most direct. As Yi Zichen stared at him, a familiar yet unfamiliar emotion welled up in his heart. After a while, he confirmed that this emotion. He was trembling. It was a trembling that emanated from the depths of his soul. He had forgotten how long it had been since he had felt this way, but the young man in front of him, who exuded the aura of a celestial being, made him feel this way. The Bai family clansmen surrounding the Yao ceiling pagodas, Yao servants, all stopped in their tracks. Their eyes brimmed with terror as they looked at Yi Zichen. The appearance of the demonic shadow doubled the pressure on them, and their skin all over their body felt vaguely stinging. It wasn't that the devil's shadow had actually touched them, but this kind of pressure makes them vulnerable. Don't touch her, Yi Zichen muttered. Zichen. At that moment, Xiao Yumei felt that Yi Zichen was acting strangely. She called out his name softly and looked at him nervously. Even the Bai family patriarchs, who hadn't dared to act rashly, sensed something was wrong. They looked at Yi Zichen and before long heard him mutter again, "Don't touch her." Suddenly, the two patriarchs looked at each other. When he saw Bai Mingli attack Xiao Yumei, Yi Zichen, who grabbed Bai Jinsheng's arm, immediately dashed over and punched. "Don't touch her." When he saw Yi Zichen attack, Bai Mingli instantly stopped. Just now, he hadn't really wanted to kill Xiao Yumei. He was just testing her. Judging from Yi Zichen's reaction, the patriarchs already understood his situation. He has no will of his own. He's just an obsession in his heart. As one lived for a long time, one would naturally see more of such things. They had seen people who were on the brink of death suddenly awaken without any self-awareness. They only relied on a wisp of obsession to protect the important people they wanted to protect, and they had seen this before. In order to do this, someone or something had to hold a certain weight in their heart. Yi Zichen was just like that. Everything he did was unconscious. But what about the image behind him? Was it a Dharma body? The Bai family patriarchs couldn't help but look at each other. They were all familiar with the 108 Dharma bodies. Could it be that this Dharma body existed outside of the 108 recorded in the records? But did Dharma bodies like this really exist? It was tens of thousands of feet tall, and the pressure it emanated made even the patriarchs feel pressured. "Zichen!" Xiao Yumei called out, but Pu Jingwan reached out and grabbed her. Pu Jingwan shook her head. By now, Pu Jingwan understood Yi Zichen's situation. He'd sensed Xiao Yumei was in danger, and based on his obsession, he'd controlled his body to protect her. "Jingwan, what's going on with Zichen?" Xiao Yumei's eyes were filled with worry. Pu Jingwan looked at Xiao Yumei's worried expression, then at Yi Zichen's back. She sighed in admiration. "He really does love you. You don't need to know anything else. Just remember this." So someone like that really did exist. Pu Jingwan couldn't help but sigh. Ever since she'd arrived in the Third Era, she'd come into contact with far too many things she'd never come into contact with before, yet she'd always heard about them from the older generation. A peerless expert of the primordial era had such a sincere, faithful, and devoted obsession. "Yi Zichen, you've really taught me a lesson." Humph, how laughable. When he heard that Yi Zichen was acting on his obsession, the Bai family patriarchs snorted disdainfully. Anyone who could do this was worthy of respect. Sincere, faithful, and devoted obsession, no matter which aspect you reached the pinnacle of, you were worthy of respect. But in their eyes, this was laughable. This was especially true of Bai Jinsheng. He'd actually shuddered on behalf of a diviner brat. This was a disgrace to him. A disdainful smile tugged at his lips, and 9 flying swords appeared above Yi Zichen's head. Not only was he going to kill him, but he was going to do it in the cruelest way possible. "Zichen!" Pu Jingwan and Xiao Yumei moved at practically the same time, but to their surprise, Bai Mingli appeared right in front of them. He tapped the air and placed a seal in front of them. This kind of person, who was the embodiment of obsession, would turn all those who were important to him or were hostile to him into enemies. On the other hand, so long as they weren't hostile, he wouldn't act. Just now, if Bai Mingli had tried to stop Yi Zichen wouldn't have attacked. Chapter 1422. This flying sword had just saved Yi Zichen's life. Bai Jinsheng's aura surged. He clenched his fist, and the 9 flying swords stabilized in the air. Then, he shot towards the Bai family's inner courtyard. Ding, ding, ding. With a few crisp clangs, the flying swords were knocked aside. Before long, Bai Haoyu walked out, his expression grave and stern. Pu Jingwan and Xiao Yumei were stunned as well. They'd assumed it was Yang Jian and the great sage. They hadn't expected it to be this person. Lil Yu. The Bai family patriarchs froze as well. Bai Haoyu knocked the flying swords away and arrived before them. Patriarchs! Why are you here? Asked the patriarchs. Of course it's me. Did you really think I'd lose? Bai Haoyu's expression was calm. They naturally didn't think Bai Haoyu would lose. However, Bai Jinsheng's flying swords were aimed at Yi Zichen's life. When Bai Haoyu knocked them aside, they thought reinforcements had arrived. They stared intently at Bai Haoyu. They needed an explanation. What's wrong with them? Asked Pu Jingwan. Bai Haoyu glanced at her. They're doing fine. Those two really are your top experts. Even I can't do anything to them right now. However, the situation here caught my attention, so I came to take a look. Do you want to personally help Yulong deal with this guy? With that, Bai Jinsheng took a few steps back. Bai Haoyu walked over. Yi Zichen's aura was as imposing as ever. His intimidating eyes were fixed on Bai Jinsheng the entire time, never wavering in the slightest. Even when Bai Haoyu arrived by his side, he didn't notice. As expected, seeing Yi Zichen's situation, Bai Haoyu nodded. To everyone's surprise, he didn't look at Yi Zichen with the slightest bit of hostility. On the contrary, his gaze was filled with respect. Yi Zichen bowed deeply, then said something that left everyone flabbergasted. Can you let him go? The way Bai Haoyu saw it, it didn't matter if someone was sincere, passionate, or evil, as long as their heart was filled with obsession, they were worthy of respect. He admired such a person. With a trace of obsession in his heart, he was able to make a dying person explode with astonishing power. He was able to make a dead person come back to life and fulfill his wish. If such a person died, he would feel pity. Bai Haoyu had rushed all the way here just to help Yi Zichen survive. Even if they were supposed to be enemies, Bai Haoyu was willing to let go of his grudges and let him go, based on his stubbornness. Dumbfounded. They were all dumbfounded. No one could have imagined that Bai Haoyu would say something like that. Bai Mingli frowned, then snorted coldly at Bai Jinsheng. Your son. Pleading for mercy on behalf of the enemy, who had slaughtered over 100,000 members of the Bai family. Bai Mingli snorted coldly and walked to the side. Bai Jinsheng's face was filled with anger as he shouted at him. Do you know what you are talking about? Xiao Yu, I know you are righteous, but you need to look at the situation clearly. Can't I? Bai Haoyu sighed, not bothering to argue. Elder Ancestor Bai did not say a word, but his meaning was clear. He looked silently at Yi Zichen, then at Pu Jingwan and Xiao Yumei. Yi Zichen's gaze sharpened, and he swung his fist. Is it them? Yi Zichen retreated a few dozen meters. As his killing intent receded, he came to a stop. Is this all right? I'll deal with him myself, but can you let these two women go? Bai Haoyu pointed at Pu Jingwan and Xiao Yumei. That's fine, said the patriarch. Out of respect for Xiao Ting, they didn't really want to do anything to Xiao Yumei. Besides, the outcome was already set in stone. Letting them go didn't matter. Even if they resented the Bai family, it didn't matter. If the two of them destroyed such an enormous family, it would be a colossal joke. Thank you, patriarch. Bai Haoyu hefted his rapier and slowly approached Yi Zichen. The most respectable thing about these people who were born from their obsessions was that they were only born for their obsessions and did not have any other emotions in them. In other words, they would do everything in their power to protect the people they wanted to protect. But as for himself, even if someone tried to kill him, he wouldn't respond in the slightest. The sword hovered above Yi Zichen's neck, its edge cutting into his skin. Drops of blood dripped from the edge of the sword, but Yi Zichen stood there like a statue. Don't you dare! Pu Jingwan and Xiao Yumei bombarded the barrier repeatedly, but Bai Mingli's cultivation was far higher than theirs. Their attacks only caused a small crack to appear on the barrier, which Bai Mingli then meticulously healed. Outside the seal, Bai Haoyu could clearly sense their impatience. He'd wanted to let Yi Zichen go, even if they'd still be enemies in the future. Or rather, he was willing to give someone like Yi Zichen another chance to live. However, He couldn't disobey his patriarch. This was filial piety. After pleading on Yi Zichen's behalf, Bai Haoyu didn't argue. He knew that all he could do was keep the person he cared about alive. Fellow Taoist. Bai Haoyu's way of addressing Yi Zichen had changed. By now, he viewed Yi Zichen as an opponent worthy of respect, even if their previous cultivation levels were like a chasm between heaven and earth. Being able to protect these two friends of yours is already the limit of my ability. I can't keep you alive, but the last thing I can do for you is to make sure you leave in less pain. Don't blame me. Bai Haoyu muttered a few words into Yi Zichen's ear. He didn't care if Yi Zichen could hear him or not. With a whoosh, he shot 100 meters into the air. He wouldn't torture Yi Zichen. In order to show his respect, he'd use his strongest sword technique to send Yi Zichen off. Buzz. The rapier soared into the sky. The vibrating rapier split into 2, then into 4. In the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with sword images. Bai Haoyu stood within the formation, grasping the rapier in the center. 10,000 swords. Just as he finished building up energy and was about to attack, 4 swords tore through the air. 2 of them were aimed at the patriarch's forehead, while the other 2 were aimed at Bai Haoyu's vitals. In addition, a long ribbon wrapped around Bai Haoyu's sword-wielding wrist. After a few breaths of time, 5 figures shot through the air and appeared by his side. 4 of them were holding onto the hilt of their swords, while one of them had a ribbon tied around her wrist and was tugging on her ribbon tightly. When they saw this, Pu Jingwan and Xiao Yumei's eyes reddened inexplicably. 13th sister, on the other hand, burst into tears. Big sister, you're finally here. Chapter 1423. The attacker was too fast. Before Elder Ancestor Bai could react, the person with the sword had already appeared in front of them. Qi Shuiyang. When the 2 patriarchs saw who it was, their eyes flashed with cold light. Zhao Qianhe and Su Qinyan had appeared in front of Bai Haoyu. Zhao Qianling had bound his hands with a ribbon, preventing him from drawing his sword. We were wondering who was working for Zhou Wu in the Bai family, but we never expected it to be the 2 of you. Bai pressed his hidden dragon sword to his neck. Shui Yang and the others knew that the Bai family was working for Zhou Wu when they'd removed Spirit City's city lord, but they didn't know who the 2 ancestors of the Bai family were. Xianji had deduced that the Bai family's patriarch was no weaker than them. At the time, Shui Yang and the others had been shocked. It was very difficult for an outsider to find out about their cultivation. Previously, Lao Ai had wondered if it was Bai Mingli's Bai family, but it turned out to be true. He used to be the 5 Elements Great Emperor's trusted aide, but now he's working for Zhou Wu. I wonder how 5 Elements would feel if he were still alive, snorted Shuiyang. Su Qinyan stared at Bai Mingli and Bai Jinxing. For a long time, she didn't say anything. When the 2 of them had followed the 5 Elements' great emperor, they'd already been rulers. Wu Xing trusted them very much. However, after Wu Xing fell, the 2 of them disappeared without a trace. At that time, Bai Jinxing had not married yet, so even though they knew about the Bai clan, they did not know that they were Bai Jinxing's descendants. Winner takes all, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Even though Su Qinyan was present, Bai Mingli still spoke with conviction. Wu Xing is really blind. The 2 great generals he trained with great care have now become Zhou Wu's dogs. Xianji also landed at this time. Same here. The God Emperor nurtured you so much, but aren't you betraying him now? Bai Mingli said. Sophistry, said Xianji. Bai Mingli smiled disdainfully. When Xianji appeared with these people, he knew that this trusted aide of the God Emperor was no longer a member of the God Emperor's estate. Since they were enemies, there was nothing much to say. Shui Yang and Bai withdrew their swords as well, pushing them away from their necks. The sword at their necks was just a form of deterrence. If they really wanted to threaten their lives, it was simply a pipe dream. Bai Haoyu's reaction was even more straightforward. He simply let go of the sword and let it fall to the ground. Zhao Qianhe and Su Qingyan glanced at each other, then sheathed their swords. Zhao Qianling also loosened the ribbon around his arm. Humph! She snorted coldly at Patriarch Bai and scanned the area with her divine sense. Before long, she furrowed her brows and reappeared in front of Yi Zichen in an instant. She looked down at him, who'd lost his left arm and injured his left eye. Who did it? Boom. In an instant, Xianji's aura surged. Her threatening gaze swept around until it finally landed on Patriarch Bai. The others also looked over, and their gazes froze. Bai Mingli. Of all of them, Shui Yang understood Yi Zichen the best. He'd once fought Emperor Hades. Back then, Yi Zichen was only a Sky Supreme, but with the help of the Xianyuan sword and his heaven-plundering stance, Shui Yang couldn't help but get serious. Of all the people here, only Patriarch Bai and Bai Haoyu could injure him this badly. Despite the pressure of several Emperor-level auras, Bai Mingli didn't panic in the slightest. What are you doing? That youth came to my Bai family and slaughtered over 100,000 clansmen. All he did was take an arm and damage his eye, and you're already like this? What about the 100,000 heroic souls of our Bai family? As he spoke, Bai Mingli's aura surged. Zichen. Xianji's eyes flashed, but no matter how much she called out to him, he didn't respond. He's only standing here because of his stubbornness, but before that, his heart meridians were all damaged, and his internal divine pills shattered. Outside the barrier, Pu Jingwan spoke up. Xiao Yumei cried out, Lady Providence, please save Zichen. Qingyan. Xianji called out urgently, and Su Qingyan descended from the sky. At the same time, she took a pill out of her pocket. She accepted the pill and was just about to feed it to Yi Zichen, but he slapped her across the face. Then, a pair of vicious eyes looked right at her. It's me, Auntie. Xianji bit her lip and snatched the pill out of thin air. Auntie is here. So long as I'm here, no one can hurt you. Yi Zichen, who'd been standing here because of his stubbornness, felt his heart skip a beat. He stared fixedly at Xianji for a long time. The light in his eyes gradually dimmed, and the illusory figure behind him gradually became transparent. Auntie. Mother. He said, enunciating each word. Then, the wings behind him disappeared, and his eyes returned to normal. I can't accept this. With that, it was as if Yi Zichen had lost his last support. He toppled backwards. Su Qingyan used her divine power to support him, and Xianji shoved the pill into his mouth. Xiao Yumei wanted to go over and see Yi Zichen, but she was blocked by a seal. Noticing this, Su Qingyan waved her arm, shattering the barrier like a mirror. Xiao Yumei quickly ran in front of Yi Zichen after getting rid of the restriction. He'll be fine, right? Don't worry, said Su Qingyan with a comforting smile. What you just fed him was the nine-tailed fox clan's sacred medicine. That's good, that's good. She pulled Yi Zichen into a tight embrace. Pu Jingwan walked over and stood by her side. After feeding Yi Zichen the pill, Xianji's fury soared to the heavens, but she retained her rationality and refrained from attacking the Bai family. Big sister. 13th sister walked over with red eyes. Xianji looked at her apologetically. Deep down, she blamed herself. She had predicted that Patriarch Bai would be very powerful, but she hadn't expected him to be Bai Mingli or Bai Jinxing. That was why she had sent the god of wine and the others here, thinking that they would be enough. She, who had taken every possibility into account, had been ruthlessly tricked this time. Why aren't old wine and the others here? Brothers, 13th sister choked on her sobs. Just now, she'd taken advantage of Xianji and the others' arrival to find the divine generals. Xianji knit her brows, then looked behind 13th sister. 3rd sister had lost her right hand, and her head was covered in blood. 5th sister had a sword in her chest, and her body was covered in scars. 18th's body was covered in flying swords, and the god of wine was covered in charcoal. Buzz. In an instant, the entire world transformed into an enormous golden compass. Chapter 1424. The golden compass didn't differentiate between friend and foe. Even Shui Yang and the others were surrounded by it. In other words, all of Spirit City was about to be replaced by the compass. The cultivators beneath the city paled. They all sensed that their fates were about to be shaken. "Xianji's really angry," said Shui Yang.
"You don't need to tell me that."
"Even the destiny compass is moving," said Zhao Qianling. "This feeling of fate being shaken. Is this the divine artifact Xianji received when she ascended to godhood?" murmured Baiyan. The reason Xianji was known as the greatest diviner of all time was because of this divine artifact, the destiny compass. As expected, within the compass, Xianji gradually began to change. She wore a pure white robe and her eyes turned golden. Needles spun in her pupils, and a godhead appeared above her head. Anyone who condensed a godhead to become a god would be bestowed a divine artifact. Baiyan's hidden dragon sword and the wish god of the Sea of Innocence's wish scripture were all divine artifacts. The destiny compass was a divine artifact she'd received when she condensed her godhead. Divine artifacts were unique objects. They couldn't be copied or used by others. Only the wielder could use them. Furthermore, divine artifacts were generally far more powerful than divine artifacts forged by Master Blacksmith. However, divine artifacts couldn't be forged. Once upon a time, a great expert had forged a divine artifact. That divine artifact was ranked first on the divine weapons list, the Xianyuan sword. However, since then, no one had ever forged a divine artifact. However, all blacksmiths in the world took pride in forging something close to a divine artifact. Divine artifacts weren't used lightly, because using them consumed vast amounts of Godhead's divine power. The Bai family patriarchs paled in fright at Xianji's forcefulness. Within the compass, they felt powerless. It was like their fates were in someone else's hands, no longer under their control. However, Bai Mingli quickly regained his composure. He'd once heard the God Emperor mention the secret of Xianji's divine artifact. This divine tool did not differentiate between friend and foe. As long as one was within the range of the compass, the needle would move and the fate of the person within the compass would change. In other words, if she dared move, it wouldn't just be Bai Mingli and the others. Shui Yang, Baiyan, Su Qinyan, and the Zhao sisters' fates would all change. He refused to believe that Xianji would drag in Shui Yang and the others, as well as all the innocent people of Spirit City, just to deal with the Bai family. "Xianji, put away your God-given weapon. If you really dare drag Shui Yang and the others into this, then do it. With so many big shots, the Bai family will not suffer a loss." Bai Mingli's eyes were filled with disdain. Shui Yang and the others furrowed their brows. "What do you mean?" "I mean it literally," Bai Mingli replied. The white-robed Xianji's gaze paused for a moment. In her rage, she wanted to take revenge for her subordinate. With a thought, she activated the destiny compass. But Bai Mingli's reminder reminded her that Shui Yang and the others were there too. It wasn't just them. Yi Zichen, the Third Era's Master of the Stars, was there too. Xianji could ignore the fates of others, but she couldn't touch the Master of the Stars. From Bai Mingli's expression, Xianji could tell that he knew about the destiny compass's effects. As for how he'd learned about it, she didn't need to think too much about it. She'd only told anyone else about it once, to God Emperor Zhou Wu. Ha! The golden light faded, and when the compass disappeared from the world, the feeling of their fates being tugged at disappeared as well. Bai Mingli's eyes lit up with amusement. This was inevitable. However, Shui Yang and the others knew that Xianji had put away the compass because the Master of the Stars was here. "I don't need to use up the power of my godhead to wipe out your entire Bai family. Your Bai family isn't worthy," Xianji sneered. At that moment, Hubatzi and the rest of the profound pavilion arrived. Before long, miserable screams filled the air. In less than 100 breaths of time, all of the Bai family clansmen standing behind Xianji were wiped out. "See? There's no need to follow them." When Bai Mingli heard this, his expression didn't change much. Xianji hadn't bothered with the god of wine and the others because she knew Su Qinyan would investigate their situation on her behalf. Just now, out of the corner of her eye, she'd seen Su Qinyan examine their injuries, then feed them pills. This meant they were still alive. After feeding them pills, 13 took care of them, while Su Qinyan approached Xianji. Their injuries are fairly serious. The god of wine's condition is even worse than Yi Zichen's. It's best if we don't tangle with them as much as possible. We should leave as soon as possible and let the hermit emperor examine them, said Su Qinyan. Xianji nodded in understanding. Hubatzi and the others had already gone to the god of wine's side. When they saw the god of wine and the others' condition, they rushed over, furious. Big sister, I know how you're feeling, but Qinyan told me that they need to find the hermit emperor as soon as possible to heal them. We don't have time to waste on them, transmitted Xianji. Then take them with you, big sister. We'll stay here and wipe out the Bai family. Hubatzi gnashed his teeth. The other divine generals nodded as well. The profound pavilion's divine generals were especially close to each other. When they saw their brothers in such grave injuries, how could they just let the matter rest? Don't be rash. What's the point of you staying here? Do you know who my nephew brought with him? 4 emperors, 20 soon-to-be emperor-level rulers, and all the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Look at how many people he has left, and how many people does the Bai family have left? Hubatzi and the others fell silent. There was no need to mention the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Just the 4 emperors were more than enough. 4 emperors were here, as well as the god of wine and the others. If Yi Zichen and the others were in such dire straits, the profound pavilion's divine generals and cultivators wouldn't be able to do anything. Besides, the Bai family's 2 patriarchs weren't people they could handle either. This operation was my mistake. I never would have guessed that the Bai family's patriarch was Bai Mingli, said Xianji, narrowing her eyes. Let's retreat for now. So many of the Bai family have died. We've profited. So we're just going to let this go? Of course not. We naturally have to avenge our grievances. Xianji didn't hesitate in the slightest. The Bai family and the profound pavilion are enemies now. If we don't destroy the Bai family, how can I possibly rest? However, right now, the god of wine and my nephew's injuries are more important, so I won't bicker with them for now. They'd come here to find Yi Zichen. Setting aside their enmity with the Bai family for now, as long as Yi Zichen was still alive, they'd accomplish their goal. The other major powers of the Divine Mountains received Xianji's transmission as well. Once they understood the situation, they made preparations to retreat. Chapter 1425. The Yao servants of the profound pavilion and Yao Ceiling Pagoda watched the approaching Bai family clansmen vigilantly. Bai Mingli wanted the great emperors to stay behind? That seemed rather arrogant. These weren't the same people Yi Zichen had brought with him. The Sea of Innocence's Ocean Emperor, the Palace Master of the 4 Directions Palace, the Jade Lake Palace Master, the Empress of the 9-Tailed Fox Clan, and the Profound Pavilion's Pavilion Master. If any of these people were in the 3 realms, they could stomp their feet and cause the entire 3 realms to tremble. Bai Mingli and Bai Jinxing, 2 of the Bai family's patriarchs, wanted to eat them up right here? Their appetites were truly exaggerated. But when they thought about it, Bai Mingli had made this decision despite knowing their identities. They couldn't help but think about it. Bai Mingli, do you want to eat us all up right here? Xianji narrowed her eyes and smiled. At the same time, she transmitted to Hubatzi. Ask the guards at the city gates if anyone from the Bai family's branch family has arrived. The other great emperors glanced coldly at Bai Mingli. Hubatzi nodded, then transmitted back to the guards. When Bai Mingli heard this, he laughed heartily. I wouldn't dare. You're all important figures who control divine mountains. How could Bai Mingli dare say he'd eat you all up? Then do you want us to stay for lunch before leaving? Baian smiled calmly, then ran his fingers over his hidden dragon sword. If that's really the case, then it just so happens that my hidden dragon sword is a bit hungry. It's time to drink blood. You're quite funny, Palace Master, said Bai Jinxing. Cut the crap. Just say what you want, snorted Zhao Qianhe. She'd already said Yi Zichen and the others needed to leave as soon as possible and head to the Sea of Innocence to help the Hermit Emperor recover. Zhao Qianhe didn't want to waste even a second. Yi Zichen's safety directly affected Shui Mo's condition. She couldn't be bothered to care about him, but before Shui Mo woke up, he couldn't die. Don't be in such a rush. Your presence brings light to our humble home. In truth, we don't mind keeping you here. It's just that. You've seen it for yourself. The people you want to take away caused quite a ruckus. The Bai family has lost over 100,000 men. How can we just let you take them away like this? Otherwise, how am I supposed to explain this to my fellow clan members? If word of this gets out, where will I put my face? Bai Mingli said with a fake smile. Xianji, your nephew injured my descendant, said Bai Jinxing. If that's the case, then we'll have to settle the score. Zhao Qianling's gaze turned cold. The people who hurt my daughter are from the Bai family, aren't they? Qianling. Shui Yang furrowed his brows. Shut up. Zhao Qianling glared at them angrily. I didn't want to make a fuss when I came here, but can't you tell that the Bai family wants us to give them an explanation? Since they want it, we'll give it to them. As expected of the Zhao sisters, Zhao Qianling had barely finished speaking when Zhao Qianhe walked out, sword in hand. When they moved, Bai Haoyu teleported to Elder Ancestor Bai's side and stood with his sword in front of him. The Zhao sisters, who were just about to attack, stopped in their tracks. From what they could tell, Bai Haoyu's aura was even stronger than that of the two Bai family patriarchs. Baiyan and Shui Yang's expressions grew solemn. They hadn't expected the Bai family to have such an existence. How come I've never seen this person before? Zhao Qianhe frowned and transmitted. Based on his aura, he's even stronger than Bai Mingli. How come I've never heard of someone like him in the God realm? You two, get back here, transmitted Shui Yang. No, said Zhao Qianling. Then do you think you're a match for that sword-wielding man? Qianling, don't be too impulsive. I know you care about little Mo. We're here for her too, aren't we? So long as we take Yi Zichen back, the Hermit Emperor will naturally save her, said Shui Yang. Now you're worried about little Mo? Zhao Qianling sneered. Shui Yang felt that the conflict and misunderstanding between him and his ex-wife were simply too deep. They hadn't even spoken a few words, yet it seemed like they were about to start a fight. Why had they split up all those years ago? Wasn't it because their personalities weren't compatible? He didn't care about Shui Mo? If he didn't, he wouldn't have nearly attacked the God Emperor's estate, and he wouldn't have begged the Hermit Emperor to heal her. The entire God realm knew that of the Sea of Innocence's 3 princesses, Shui Mo was the one he doted on the most. Yet when it came to Zhao Qianhe, it was as if he didn't care about her. What could he do? Was he supposed to be like Zhao Qianhe? Was he supposed to slaughter Shui Mo's entire family the moment she was injured? He was the Sea Emperor of the Sea of Innocence, the ruler of the entire northern Divine Mountain. Didn't he have to think about his people before he acted? When she saw that Zhao Qianhe and Shui Yang were about to start arguing, Su Qinyan hurriedly transmitted to them. Qianling, don't get angry. Even if you kill them here, little Mo won't be in a good state. I don't think there's anything wrong with what Shui Yang said. Besides, he invited the Hermit Emperor over to save bubbly Mo. He really cares about her. I think he cares more about his eldest daughter. After all, she's Li. Zhao Qianling. Shui Yang's expression was incomparably unsightly. Zhao Qianhe froze despite herself. To his surprise, Zhao Qianling didn't retort after being berated like this. She knew she'd just spoken without thinking. Just like that, the argument froze, and so did the confrontation with the Bai family. Little did they know that as they fought, no one noticed that a jade slip had appeared in Xianji's hand. From time to time, the slip would flash with light. After a few flashes, she put it back in her sleeve. The serious expression on his face disappeared, replaced by a smile. Bai Mingli, I'll ask you one more time. Are you sure you want to stop us? I'm not trying to stop you, said Bai Mingli. It's just that I need to give my clansmen an explanation. You better think this through. If you keep us here, it won't be so easy for us to leave later, said Xianji with a calm smile. Besides, do you really think it'll be easy to stop us with just the few people you have? What if you count the Bai family branch? What about the Yuqi and Huangfu clans? Bai Mingli smiled as well. Before Xianji and the others had arrived, he'd contacted them in preparation for a situation like this. He hadn't expected them to actually show up. In that case, Bai Mingli naturally wouldn't let them leave so easily. Capturing all of them would be a great merit to the God Emperor. When the great emperors heard this, they furrowed their brows. Baiyan started contacting the other factions, and Su Qinyan was ready to send the Nine-Tailed Fox clan in. So they're already on their way? To their surprise, Xianji's smile was still as calm as ever. That's right. When they get here, Xianji, what do you think? Chapter 1426. Within the spatial tunnel leading to Spirit City, God Emperor Zhou Wu's expression was solemn, the divine arbiter at his side. Moments ago, they'd suddenly received word that the Southern Divine Mountains Society of Saints had mobilized their forces and were heading for Spirit City's Bai family. The God Emperor's estate hadn't received this news beforehand. Only when they were almost at Spirit City's borders did word reach them. Zhou Wu immediately set out, using the Divine Arbiter's spatial powers as a medium to carry him to the Bai family. How dare Chao Feng's men make a move? And they haven't even sent word back yet. Zhou Wu stood within the spatial tunnel, his gaze sharp. Ever since Zhou Wu took over the God Emperor's estate's 8 divine mountains, he and Chao Feng had never gotten along. The two sides had always been at odds. If it weren't for the current chaos, the God Emperor's estate would have been the first to destroy Chao Feng's Society of Saints. The depth of their conflict meant that the Society of Saints had many spies from the God Emperor's estate. Their every move was under the watchful eye of God Emperor Zhou Wu. The surrounding cities were also guarded by a large number of soldiers from the God Emperor's estate. If Zhou Wu dared to make a move, the soldiers from these cities would charge straight into the enemy's base and send a message to the outside world. Be it the spies within the Association of Saints or the soldiers stationed in the city, none of them replied. Only when the Society of Saints reached the outskirts of Spirit City did word reach the God Emperor. Just how had they done it? Chao Feng seems to have prepared for this. The people we left with him are all in their headquarters, and there are several 3-star lords standing guard there, said the Divine Arbiter. What about the city guards? God Emperor, please punish me. To his surprise, the Divine Arbiter suddenly fell to her knees. Half a month ago, our soldiers in several of the southern Divine Mountain cities were purged. I was unable to receive the news in advance. I was negligent in my duty. What? Zhou Wu's expression was one of shock. He stared in shock at the kneeling Divine Arbiter, then sighed and put his left hand to his forehead. They were purged? That's nearly 1,000,000 cultivators. I don't know what method Chao Feng used, but the soldiers in those cities vanished overnight. They didn't send back a single message. This is my negligence. Please punish me, God Emperor, said the Divine Arbiter solemnly. Forget it. Sighing, Zhou Wu used his divine power to lift the Divine Arbiter off the ground. Chao Feng has always done things in a watertight manner. Among the few sons left behind by the Dragon God, he seemed to have the least desire to contend for hegemony. He chose the southernmost iceberg with the worst strategic environment. However, he was the most meticulous in his actions. Compared to Bai An's arrogance, he was especially reserved. Since he dared to touch my people, he must have done everything. Get ready. It's not surprising that you don't know about it. Zhou Wu was one of the people who understood Chao Feng the most. Ever since he ascended to the position of God Emperor, the more he felt that Chao Feng seemed to be living in seclusion, but in his heart, he had the desire to fight for supremacy. Compared to Lao Ai, who showed off his abilities and everyone knew that he wanted to ascend to the throne, the God Emperor felt that this Chao Feng was even more of a threat to him than Lao Ai. He had been wondering when Chao Feng would show his sharp teeth, but now it seemed, this was the moment. As Zhou Wu sighed, the divine arbiter remained silent. The Yuqi and Huangfu families. They sent reinforcements, but the Lord of 7 Stars stopped them, said the divine arbiter. 7 Stars? Is that the Lord of 7 Stars who appeared 100 years ago, the one who wields the Big Dipper? Asked Zhou Wu. That's right. The divine arbiter nodded. In truth, the Lord of 7 Stars is also Yi Zichen's birth mother. I know that. Using Yi Zichen as a bait, Zhou Wu had long since investigated his background. In truth, before taking action, he'd hesitated. Of the 8 divine mountains, only the Society of Saints made him apprehensive. If he used Yi Zichen as a bait, there was an extremely high chance that the Lord of 7 Stars would oppose him. However, he'd considered the possibility that Chao Feng would step in and stop him. He never would have guessed that his own plan would become Chao Feng's driving force. The only ones who hadn't made a move yet were the Hermit Palace, the Supreme Hall, the Void Temple, and the Great Freedom Divine Mountains. Although they weren't the main fighting force, if any of them joined Shuiyang's side, they'd be like tigers that had grown wings. The external threat hadn't been dealt with yet, but internal trouble had already arisen. If Zhou Wu wanted to stabilize his position as God Emperor, he had to make contact with these factions. He couldn't afford to lose the Bai family. He just wanted to test the Bai family's loyalty and strength. He hadn't expected things to turn out like this. How much longer until we reach Spirit City? Less than a quarter hour. The God Emperor sighed in relief, closed his eyes, and calmed himself. The Star Altar. Shuiyang and the other great emperors looked up into the sky. It was clearly daytime, but their appearance had transformed the sky above Spirit City into a starry sky. Yi Rong stood at the very front of the Star Altar, her robes draped with 7 stars. Behind her were countless star lords. The stars shone resplendently, dazzlingly bright. The Society of Saints. Only now did Bai Mingli's eyes truly betray his unease and fear. He glowered at Xian Ji and gnashed his teeth. The Society of Saints is on your side too. We're not exactly on the same side, but you might not know this, but the youth you just tried to kill is the current Lord of 7 Stars' only son. Boom. Bai Mingli's mind buzzed. That one sentence alone had pushed him into a bottomless abyss. The Lord of 7 Stars' only son. Impossible. If he really is the Lord of 7 Stars' son, why didn't the God Emperor tell the Bai family about this? Why didn't the Bai family know anything about it? If he did, would you still dare go along with his plan? Xian Ji laughed coldly. The truth was out. As soon as Bai Mingli mentioned the God Emperor, both Shuiyang and Zhao Qianling understood that the God Emperor was the mastermind behind all of this. When the God Emperor ordered Bai Yulong to injure Shuimo, the Bai family would undoubtedly investigate her identity. However, the God Emperor had revealed everything, but he'd kept Yi Zichen's identity a secret. He was afraid the Bai family would have misgivings about the Lord of 7 Stars, preventing his plan from progressing. To put it bluntly, the God Emperor had already cast the Bai family as a sacrificial pawn to test the waters. If he could resist everything, that would be for the best, but if he couldn't, then he'd use the Bai family as the price for finding out everything. Unfortunately, the God Emperor definitely hadn't predicted that the Society of Saints would actually attack. In that case, he had no choice but to take back the Bai family. Otherwise, given his strength, he wouldn't be able to control the alliance of divine mountains. That wasn't all. He still had to try contacting the divine mountains that weren't the main fighting force. It seems the God Emperor is on his way as well, snorted Xianji, her eyes flashing with wisdom. Then my branch by family. They can't come. At that moment, the Lord of 7 Stars, Yi Rong, descended from the star altar. She glanced coldly at Bai Mingli, then turned to Xianji. Where's Zichen? Is he hurt? Xianji and the others instantly fell silent. After a while, Su Qinyan walked out and pointed in Xiao Yumei's direction. Let's go take a look. Everyone's solemn expressions made Yi Rong's heart sink further. Then she turned around. Chapter 14:27. Yi Rong's every step shook the hearts of the Bai family clansmen. Whether it was the Bai family's patriarchs or the Bai family's ordinary clansmen, they all knew what Star Altar, Lord of 7 Stars, represented. The Lord of 7 Stars was the leader of the stars. She controlled millions of stars outside of the fated star and the Emperor's auxiliary stars. When a monarch raged, blood flowed for thousands of miles. When the 7 stars raged, the Milky Way trembled. The Bai family clansmen held their breath. They'd all heard Yi Rong's cold snort. Bai Mingli and Bai Jinxing clenched their fists. At that moment, Bai Haoyu suddenly appeared in front of Yi Rong. Scram! Yi Rong didn't make any unnecessary movements. She simply waved her hand, and a river of stars condensed in the sky. Dazzling starlight descended from the heavens, poured into the river, and blasted Bai Haoyu back. Bai Haoyu held his rapier horizontally across his chest. He felt something sweet in his throat, and a trickle of blood seeped out of his tightly clenched teeth. When they saw this, everyone paled. No one doubted the Lord of 7 Stars' strength, but she just waved her hand and forced Bai Haoyu back. Was she an imperial emperor? Yi Rong didn't pay much attention to Bai Haoyu. Starlight shimmered beneath her feet, transforming into lotus imprints that hovered in the sky. After a few breaths of time, she reached Xiao Yumei and saw Yi Zichen in her arms. He'd lost his left eye and arm. Xiao Yumei's body stiffened, and a murderous aura flashed through her eyes. It's you. Yi Rong had an impression of Xiao Yumei. Back in the modern realm, this daughter-in-law had once visited Yi Zichen's home. Both her manner of speech and her temperament had pleased Yi Rong. When she saw Yi Rong, Xiao Yumei froze. She'd naturally heard of the Lord of 7 Stars in the God realm, but she hadn't guessed she was Yi Zichen's mother. Give him to me. Xiao Yumei didn't suspect anything. She carefully used her divine power to send Yi Zichen over. Yi Rong caught Yi Zichen through the air, then let him float in the air. In the blink of an eye, his eyes flashed with starlight. It was as if all the stars in the heavens were drawn to him. Their dazzling astral energy converged into a long river that flowed into Yi Zichen's forehead. Gradually, Yi Zichen's entire body was enveloped in starlight. Atop the star altar, the multi-star lord's eyes were filled with envy. The Lord of the 7 Stars of the Big Dipper had personally drawn starlight into his body. This was something that even the lords of the 4 stars dreamed of. However, they also knew that this young man was the son of the Lord of 7 Star. They couldn't help but be envious of him. What is she doing? Zhao Qianhe asked. Drawing starlight into one's body, Bayan explained. For ordinary people, drawing starlight into their bodies can improve their cultivation and strengthen their bodies. However, those without star fate would not be able to store too much starlight in their bodies. Too much starlight would cause their bodies to explode and they would die. Yi Zichen's Milky Way was something any other emperor-level ruler would have died long ago. Explode. However, Yi Zichen is the Lord of the Emperor Star, and the Lord of 7 Stars is guiding starlight into his body. He should be healing his injuries. You know quite a bit, said Shuiyang. Bayan shook his head and smiled bitterly. He had always been obsessed with the Emperor's Star. He had a deep understanding of the Emperor's Star, the auxiliary stars, the fated stars, and the multitude of stars. How to contact the stars, how to enter the body of starlight, and the effects of starlight. He'd researched all of this. However, in the end, he didn't have a star fate, so it was all for naught. Yi Rong stood in front of him for about 100 breaths of time. When she removed her hand from Yi Zichen's forehead, the starlight within the Milky Way continued to flow into his body. Yi Rong shot Xiao Yumei a meaningful glance, then turned to Bai Mingli. It was a calm look, but it was this pair of eyes that made elder ancestor Bai's heart turn cold.
Do you remember what I said before?
I injured him. I'll take responsibility for my own actions. If there's any trouble, come at me. Don't drag the Bai family into it. Bai Haoyu's eyes narrowed. Lil Yu. The patriarch's pupils constricted, but he didn't say anything else. He didn't plead on his behalf, nor did he say anything about how the Bai family was willing to fight alongside him. From their expressions, it was clear that they really were prepared to let Bai Haoyu take the brunt of this calamity for the Bai family. I didn't ask who did it, said Yi Rong. But I really was the one who did it, Bai Haoyu said fearlessly. I damaged his eye and severed his arm. But none of that matters to me. Yi Rong chuckled. Suddenly, 7 stars appeared in the sky. They were the Big Dipper. If you injure him, no matter who it is, as long as it's a member of the Bai family, then I'll destroy the entire Bai family. I leave the Bai family. Too late. Yi Rong didn't give them any chance. She raised her arms and looked up at the Big Dipper. Receive the punishment of the Big Dipper. 7-star sword rain. 7 formations appeared around the 7 stars, each of them radiating even brighter than the Big Dipper. In an instant, a rain of swords descended from the sky. Ding, ding, ding. The Bai family clansmen raised their weapons to meet the rain of swords. One after another, they fell from the sky. Bai Mingli and Bai Jinxing's eyes were bloodshot. The rain of swords was like the Grim Reaper's scythe, reaping the lives of the Bai family clansmen. When the rain of swords hit the ground, it created a dense mist of blood. The Bai family's main residence was practically razed to the ground. The Bai family patriarchs did their best to keep their clansmen alive. This rain of swords was different from when they'd fought Yi Zichen and the others. This rain of swords was an area of effect attack. Every second that passed, they lost 10% more clansmen. In just a few breaths of time, the Bai family had suffered far more casualties than the Profound Pavilion and Yao Sealing Pagoda had. Lord of 7 stars, roared the Bai family patriarchs. This is what you deserve. Yi Rong's eyes were emotionless. Space shift. At that moment, the sky above the Bai family seemed to change. The rain of swords suddenly vanished. Before long, they saw the rain of swords descending 100 meters away. Xian Ji and the others looked behind them. The Divine Arbiter and God Emperor Zhou Wu rushed over. Your Excellency, God Emperor. The Bai family patriarchs and the ordinary clansmen gathered around the God Emperor. When Bai Mingli arrived by the God Emperor's side, he knelt in the sky. God Emperor, please seek justice for the Bai family. Looking ahead, all of Spirit City was soaked in blood, and the Bai family estate was surrounded by mountains of corpses. The dead clansmen were riddled with holes. They'd all been pierced by the rain of swords. He looked at Yi Rong, then scanned the area with his divine sense. Chao Feng didn't come? Zhou Wu muttered to himself. He glanced at the Bai family patriarchs, then turned to Yi Rong. Lord of 7 stars, could you give me some face and spare the Bai family?